Drizzling. Ooh, what a relief. Hao Yun stood at the urinal in the service station restroom and let out a long sigh. He had been holding it in for nearly 2 hours on the highway, his bladder almost bursting. Relieving himself made him feel physically lighter. He shook himself off, but splashed some onto the back of his hand from the force. He hurried over to the tap and washed his hands. In the mirror, his hair was a mess and his eyes were puffy. No surprise there. The tour group had woken him up at 5 in the morning to get on the road. These people are something else. 10-minute stop, like we're racing against death, he muttered, grabbing a paper towel to dry his hands slowly and straightening his collar. The bus was right outside the door, so what was the rush? Hao Yun, true to his name, was a walking magnet for bad luck. That morning he had been laid off by his company, and HR had changed him 200 yuan in overtime pay. That afternoon his landlord raised the rent by exactly 200 yuan. That night he made instant noodles only to find no seasoning packet, and the fork snapped clean in half. Hao Yun, your name really fits you perfectly. 24 years old, 2 years out of college, a game tester who had just lost his job. 5-figure savings, 6-figure debt, the textbook example of a down-on-his luck city dweller. The only thing he had going for him was his gaming skill. Back in university, he had won quite a few tournament prizes by speedrunning all kinds of old single-player games. While others played games for the story, he hunted for bugs, clipping through walls, sequence breaking, value overflows, infinite items. The clunkier the old game, the better he performed. Unfortunately, that talent was useless in real life. Laid off, Hao Yun had signed up for a tour group to clear his head. 100 yuan for a one-day round trip. Of course, the cheap price came with caveats. He barely slept on the long bus ride, listening non-stop to the tour guide hawking health supplements. Stepping out of the restroom, the afternoon sunlight made him squint. Hao Yun glanced toward where the coach bus had been parked. Empty. How could it be empty? He blinked, convinced he was seeing things. The parking bay was completely vacant, save for a plastic bottle tumbling across the asphalt in the wind. Not far away on the ramp, the familiar white coach bus slowly accelerated, about to merge onto the main highway. Shit. Hao Yun's brain froze for half a second before adrenaline flooded his system. His backpack was still on the overhead rack, wallet, phone, ID card, all of it inside. Even his jacket was on his seat. And the bag of oranges he had just bought was on the bus too. Wait. Stop. He sprinted forward, his sandals slapping hard against the concrete, running faster than he had since his high school entrance exam. Wind rushed down his collar, billowing his t-shirt. He waved his arms wildly as he ran. I haven't gotten on. Hao Yun pushed himself to his absolute limit, shouting at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing across the service station. He even jumped and waved, hoping the driver would spot him in the rear view mirror. Driver, I'm still out here. But the bus only sped up, its taillights flashing, as it drew closer to vanishing at the end of the ramp. Gasping for breath, Hao Yun skidded to a halt, hands on his hips, chest heaving. As he stared at the empty road, 3 seconds of silence passed. Crooked tour operators. I'm demanding a refund when I get back. Almost as if his threat had worked, just as he was about to give up, the bus ahead screeched and slowly pulled over onto the emergency lane. Finally, he heard me. Overjoyed, he sprinted over. The bus doors hissed open. He darted inside, leaning against the doorframe to catch his breath and nodding repeatedly toward the driver's seat. Thank you so much, sir. Sorry for taking so long in the restroom. The driver said nothing, motionless with his back turned. Hao Yun paid it no mind, wiping sweat as he walked toward the passenger compartment. He took 2 steps and froze. Something was wrong. The entire bus was deathly quiet. An elderly woman in the front row sat with her mouth open mid-snack, hands suspended in the air. A young couple leaned their heads together, the boy's hand resting halfway on the girl's shoulder. Further back, a middle-aged man held a thermos, its lid half twisted open. Everyone was locked in position, just like wax museum figures. Hao Yun stared for 2 seconds, then a smirk crept onto his face. Oh, a prank. He knew this trope. You saw this sort of thing in online skits all the time. Time freeze. Everyone frozen solid. And then, well, whatever came next. Hao Yun coughed to compose himself and strolled slowly down the aisle with his hands behind his back. Nice trick. Tour groups really go all out these days, he muttered. He waved a hand right in front of the elderly woman's eyes. She did not blink. They were committing hard to the bit. All right, cut it out. I see what you're doing. Where's the hidden film crew? Where are the cameras? He began hunting for recording devices, above the seats, in the overhead racks, between seat cushions, even peering into the air conditioning vents. He quietly flipped open the tour guide's bag and rummaged through it too. He knelt and stuck his head under the seats, getting a face full of dust. He even lifted the elderly woman's wig to check for a hidden pinhole camera underneath. Nothing. Not a single camera anywhere. Fine. If you want to mess with me, I'll play along. Hao Yun's gaze fell on an attractive woman a few rows ahead. Since they were all conspiring to prank him, he decided to mess right back. He rubbed his hands together, thinking he would give her cheek a playful poke to break the act. But the moment his hand moved toward her, golden light flared around her body. His fingers could not make contact at all. His smile froze completely. What was this golden glow? Had under one person been telling the truth the whole time? The golden light spell was real. If he had known, he would have dropped everything and traveled to Longhu Mountain to learn cultivation. What a waste of years. He reached for another passenger nearby. Again, golden light burst forth. It felt like touching cold metal. He could not make physical contact. He hurried over to a window and looked outside. The once busy highway service station stood perfectly still. Every person out in the open was locked in place. Hao Yun swallowed hard. Cold sweat trickled down his back. His face paled bit by bit. This was no prank. The world had actually stopped. Some power had frozen every human being on Earth and somehow forgotten about him. Hao Yun did not know whether to laugh or cry. One thing was certain, though. He wanted to yell at the heavens. You freeze time and you throw in this golden light barrier for what? Why can't I get the classic movie time stop experience? Don't you know this was my childhood fantasy? Other people get to do whatever they want in time. Stop, and I'm just here sightseeing. I didn't buy a ticket for this exhibit. He squatted in the bus aisle and thumped the floor in dismay. His childhood fantasy had shattered completely. Still, as a veteran game tester, he adapted fast. No matter how absurd a bug was, you first accepted it, then figured out how to work with it. He took a deep breath, forced himself to calm down, sat cross-legged in the aisle, and entered his bug analysis mode. Hao Yun ticked off possibilities on his fingers. Scenario 1. The freeze only lasts an hour or two. His options would be limited. He could rummage through other passengers' snacks and drinks on the bus, grab cigarettes and energy drinks from the service station convenience store, maybe even fill up a vehicle with free gasoline at the gas station. But he was flat broke. He did not own a car. Downstairs at his rental apartment was a 500 yuan second-hand Phoenix Road bicycle he had bought. Bicycles, unfortunately, did not run on gasoline. Too small scale. Hao Yun shook his head and dismissed that plan. He had already wasted 100 yuan on the tour. Just grabbing a few sodas would be pathetic. Scenario 2. The freeze lasts a day or two. More possibilities opened up. His eyes lit up. The highway was right there. Driving into the city took just over an hour. The driver could not move, but the bus keys were still in the ignition. He held a C1 driving license. He had never operated a large coach bus, but he had played countless racing video games. The basic principles ought to be similar, right? What would he do in the city? Head straight for a bank. ATMs would not work. He would need access to the vault. But he had no idea where the vault door was or what the password was. He could not exactly smash through concrete walls. He had no tools for that. What about a jeweler's store? Hao Yun stroked his chin, smash the glass, load up on gold, and run the second time resumes. Then he hesitated. Surveillance cameras were everywhere. If he wore a mask and looted gold, the footage would show a masked figure appearing out of nowhere, clearing out the shop, then vanishing. That would draw far too much attention. He might end up captured for government research. Too risky, he decided. Scenario 3. The freeze dragged on for months or longer. The priorities shifted from getting rich to simple survival. Would water and electricity keep working? Would the internet hold up? Would food spoil? He could not live off service station instant noodles forever. Being the only moving person on the planet would drive him insane eventually. A shiver ran down Hao Yun's spine. Permanent time stops sounded terrifying, like a life sentence with no release. He recalled a Hollywood movie he had watched once. On a spaceship, everyone slept in hibernation pods, except the protagonist whose pod malfunctioned and woke him alone decades early. That meant he would live out his whole life in total isolation and grow old all by himself. Thinking of that, he shouted toward the sky again. Oh, higher power, don't leave me out of the freeze too. While Hao Yun's mind raced with possibilities, a system-like voice echoed from above. It was definitely not a thought inside his own head. The sound came from the heavens. World reconstruction process initiated objective. Convert planet into open world survival game. Current progress, 0. 3% freeze native intelligences to prevent interference with reconstruction. Hao Yun. He stared blankly at the glowing text floating overhead, his mind buzzing. Freeze native intelligences? The global time Stop was not targeted at him. Some cosmic force was remaking Earth into a game and had locked all humans as NPCs. But was he not an intelligent being? Was he not human? Why was he the single one left unfrozen? Loading core game modules, more lines of text scrolled across the sky, just like boot up logs from an old video game. Vital signs system added a faint warmth brushed the top of Hao Yun's head. He reached up and touched nothing. But when he focused his mind, status bars appeared in his field of vision. HP 100/100 full stamina, 72/100 not fully recovered from sprinting after the bus. Whoa, actual health bars? He blinked. Then his game tester instincts kicked in. Do I feel real pain when I take damage? Are there hit-stun effects? Inventory system added initial backpack, 10 slots, expandable via items. Hao Yun mentally commanded open inventory, and a grid-based interface popped into view, completely empty. He picked up the bag of oranges he had bought before boarding the bus and thought, store this. The oranges vanished instantly and appeared neatly in the first inventory slot. Incredible. Excited, he mentally pulled them back out. The bag reappeared in his hands smoothly, just like in a well-polished old-school single-player game. Map added a mini-map appeared in the upper corner of his sight. A green dot marked his position. Gray markers showed the bus, convenience store, gas station, and even the restroom. Hao Yun whistled. More accurate than my phone's GPS. Player status panel added a semi-transparent blue VR-style panel floated in the center of his vision. Player, Hao Yun level, 10 out of 100 class. None title, none spirit crystals, 0 strength. 5 average adult male baseline agility. 5 constitution, 5 intelligence, 6 spirit, 7 luck. 15 unassigned attribute points, 0 skills. None. The bright red, 15 luck stat glared at him. Hao Yun's face darkened. So my terrible luck is officially system validated? They even tagged me during world reconstruction. The progress bar in the sky kept creeping forward, enabling one game feature after another. Quest system, skill system, trading system, weather system. Hao Yun tilted his head upward, watching like he was tuning into a game showcase and offering running commentary. Environment system upgrade. Extreme weather events enabled new disaster types. Solar flares, total solar eclipses, persistent heat waves, severe cold snaps, disaster trigger, random. Difficulty increases as game progresses. Hold on. Hao Yun jumped to his feet. Solar flares? Freezing cold snaps? Up until that moment he had daydreamed about heading into town to grab supplies and enjoy easy comfort. Now heat waves and blizzards were on the table. This was no casual open world adventure. It was a harsh survival endgame. Solar flares would fry all electronics, turning phones and computers into useless scrap. Total eclipses would plunge the world into pitch black darkness. Sweltering heat or bitter cold would kill him in his short-sleeved shirt and shorts. Does this cosmic developer not know about new player protection? Throwing hard mode hazards right out the gate. No answer came. The loading bar kept advancing. Ecosystem restructuring. Mutation module for wildlife loaded. Effect 1. Wildlife reproduction rate increased by 500%. Effect 2. Random physical and ability mutations. Overall aggression raised. Effect 3. Select species unlock special abilities. Hao Yun's mouth twitched. 5. Fold reproduction speed plus mutations. He glanced out the window. Several stray cats lounged near the service station wall, looking harmless, unaware humanity had been frozen. What would happen once they mutated? Growing several times larger? Unleashing elemental attacks? Then there were rats, cockroaches, mosquitoes, creatures that already bred fast. Multiply their numbers by 5 and add mutations, and the thought alone was horrifying. Am I going to need industrial-grade insect spray just to step outside? Hao Yun swallowed hard, vividly imagining giant cockroaches the size of human arms chasing him down. Silence filled the coach bus. Hao Yun sat there for more than 10 minutes. Nothing outside changed. He confirmed the time. Freeze was not ending. He pulled open the bus door and walked back toward the service station. Hunger gnawed at him too badly to stay. He had been woken at 5 that morning for the tour bus. All day he had eaten half a pack of biscuits and drunk half a bottle of water. His stomach rumbled loudly. The tour had promised included meals. Cheap group, set meals with 2 meat dishes, 1 vegetable dish, soup, and unlimited rice. That opportunity was gone. The tour group was gone. Only his hunger remained. Earlier thoughts of robbing jewelers' stores had completely vanished. Now that the whole planet was being rebuilt as a game, gold would lose its value. It might not even be worth more than a grilled sausage. Hao Yun walked through the service station hall. Every person stood frozen like wax figures. He scanned the crowd and found no other moving survivors. Then his eyes landed on the shops lining the hall. Odin Hot, pot skewers, a grill with sizzling sausages, ice, cream freezers, fresh brewed coffee. Shelves upon shelves stocked with snacks and drinks. There was also the local specialty shop he had passed 3 times without daring to enter, displaying fancy cured meat gift boxes priced at 188 yuan each. A realization hit him. Everything in this world was free now. Not technically free, but there was no one left to charge money. I can take whatever I want. First, a grilled sausage to quiet my stomach. Hao Yun hurried over to the food stall and dug in. He held one sausage in each hand while chewing a third. Normally service, station food was outrageously expensive, something he could never afford. Savory meat juices burst across his tongue. He finished one sausage in 3 big bites, grease smearing the corners of his mouth. He grabbed 2 Odin skewers next. The radish soaked in rich broth was soft and tender as he bit down. Having eaten half his fill, the game tester in him kicked in. He turned around and started testing the limits of his backpack system. He grabbed a bottle of iced cola and mentally commanded, "Put into backpack." The cold bottle vanished from his palm in an instant. On the backpack interface in his field of view, slot 2 held the cola quietly, with the number 1 in the bottom, right corner. He picked up another bottle and stowed it away. The number jumped straight to 2. Stackable. Standard single, player, game mechanics. Hao Yun's eyes lit up. He stood in front of the freezer and kept shoving cola bottles into his backpack. 1, 2, 5, 10. The number stopped changing once it hit 20. 20 per stack. Fixed per slot stack limit. He jotted the observation down mentally and moved on to test mineral water, bread, and potato chips. Every item capped out at 20 per stack. Once his 10-slot default backpack was stuffed full of food and water, Hao Yun had nothing left to do. He lay around in the service area, waiting for the time freeze to end. He was only one man, and his power was tiny. He had no idea how to cope with such an abrupt upheaval. When time resumed, he knew he would have to align himself with national authorities. His imagination ran wild as he pictured what would unfold once time started flowing again. Within half a day, special government agency operatives would trace the anomalous signals to this spot. Black sedans would pull up. Suit-clad agents would respectfully invite him on board. They would run power assessment tests and review his aptitude before formally offering him a spot in Dragon Unit. Layoffs, rent payments, and debts would all become trivial concerns. He would don custom, issue combat gear, head out on missions alongside teammates, uphold justice, and safeguard global peace. He might even earn the call sign, Chosen One, living a glorious life. First thing I'll do is pay off all my online loans, he mumbled around a mouthful of ham sausage. Then get myself a top-tier PC. Playing video games on the job would count as official duty. That'd beat being a game tester by a mile. Yet vivid fantasies crumbled against cold reality. The sun drifted west from its high noon position and sank past the highway horizon. The sky shifted from warm tangerine to deep violet, then faded into full darkness. An entire day slipped by. Everyone inside the service area remained frozen in place. The time freeze showed 0 signs of lifting. Hao Yun's initial excitement ebbed away alongside daylight. He was about to grab more snacks for dinner when something unexpected happened. First, the constant hum of the convenience store freezer fell silent. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered twice, then clicked off completely. At almost the exact same moment, hall lamps, street lights, gas, station neon signs, and roadway illumination all cut out. Thick darkness swallowed the whole service area. Only a faint last sliver of twilight traced the outlines of buildings. The power was out. Hao Yun froze for 2 seconds and fumbled for his phone to turn on its screen. Pale blue light washed over his slightly pale face. The signal bar was empty, marked by a large cross. Even the service area Wi-Fi he had used earlier could no longer be detected. Without human operators, power grids and cell towers had been bound to fail sooner or later. Still, total blackout and complete loss of connectivity sent a flicker of anxiety through him. "I can't spend the night holed up in this hall," he muttered, heading toward the parking lot. The drafty hall offered no shelter in pitch-black conditions. A locked vehicle would at least block wind and offer safety. Bad luck struck again. He pulled on 7, 8 parked cars, every single one locked tight. He finally managed to yank open a beat-up minivan, whose door creaked loudly as it moved. Luck -15. "Can't believe how terrible my luck is. Hao Yun. Hao Yun. What a name for a guy like me." He rubbed his forehead, pulled the van door shut and locked it, then slumped onto the seat, catching his breath. The vehicle was battered, yet it formed a closed-off shelter good enough for one night. Maybe the time freeze would break by dawn. He leaned back to relax, when his peripheral vision caught the mini-map in the upper left corner flickering. Several tiny red dots drifted over from outside, drawing straight toward the minivan. Hao Yun sat bolt upright. He pulled the foldable fruit knife he had taken from the supermarket out of his system backpack. Enemy contact? As a lifelong gamer, he knew exactly what those dots signified. Green dots stood for allies, yellow for neutrals, and red for hostiles. Good grief. What kind of enemies are these? He held his breath, pressing his back tight against the seat back, staring hard at the dark window, hardly daring to breathe. Goblins? Slimes? Kobolds? He wondered nervously. His nerves were stretched taut when a faint tickling sensation pricked his left arm. Acting purely on reflex, Hao Yun slapped it hard. His palm met something sticky. At the very same instant, a chime echoed inside his head. The closest red dot on the map vanished outright. Ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 silence hung in the air for 2 seconds. Hao Yun slowly opened his palm. Lit by his phone screen lay the squashed corpse of a mosquito. He glanced down at it, then back at the remaining slowly drifting red dots on the map. The corners of his mouth twitched. All that tension and the so-called enemy attack is just a bunch of mosquitoes? The weight in his chest lifted. He had expected world-altering monsters once reality turned into a game, not this underwhelming threat. He flicked the mosquito corpse off his hand and opened his character panel. He remained level 1. But his experience bar shifted from 0 out of 100 to 1/100th, filling only a tiny sliver barely noticeable at a glance. This deity sure cuts corners. Terrible game design. Hao Yun complained as he stared at his stats. Balance is completely broken. You can swat these mosquitoes with your bare hands, yet still earn experience. Everyone would end up max level at this rate. Given how many mosquitoes live on Earth, billions of people could grind their way to maximum level. If we ran short, laboratories could breed more. Laboratories can churn out hundreds of millions of mosquitoes in a single day. Complaints aside, this gave him a new idea. He had absolutely nothing to pass the time. Short, video apps and offline games were no longer accessible without internet. I might as well grind levels right now. When time resumes, I'll be miles ahead of everyone else. He wondered whether a global level leaderboard existed, where he could see his name listed. Glancing at his level 1 stats and the red dots on the minimap, Hao Yun grew eager. These mosquitoes posed no real threat. Free experience waiting to be collected. He pulled the vehicle door wide open. Hot air and a swarm of mosquitoes surged toward his face in a buzzing cloud, nearly knocking him backward. He switched on his phone flashlight. The beam revealed countless tiny dark shapes swirling about like scattered sesame seeds. The scattered red dots on the minimap merged into a thick patch of red fog, sending a chill down his spine. Whoa, there are this many. I never noticed while inside the van. He flinched. Then he reminded himself they were pure experience points. Fear was pointless. He set his phone upright on a stone pillar, so its beam shone directly onto himself, turning himself into living bait. In gaming, grinding monsters always came with costs. Mosquitoes were drawn to light. Hordes descended upon him. Hao Yun began farming experience. Smack, 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 ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 after a dozen minutes. He leaned against the van door, gasping for breath. He checked his panel. Level 137/100. Only 37 points. He frowned. This rate is abysmal. At this pace, I would be grinding deep into midnight just for 1 level, and my hands would swell up. An idea struck him. Why waste energy swatting manually? The convenience store stocked insect, killer spray, and electric mosquito swatters. Those were perfect grinding tools. There was no sense fighting mosquitoes bare-handed, right? I can grab proper gear. He slapped his thigh and sprinted back toward the convenience store. He rushed to the household goods shelf. His flashlight beam fell over multiple cans of insecticide and several rechargeable electric swatters hanging nearby. He picked one up and pressed the switch. Blue light crackled across its electric grid. This is the real monster, farming artifact. He hurried back to the doorway and swung the swatter hard through the incoming mosquito swarm. Crackle pop. Sparks flashed. Multiple mosquitoes were incinerated instantly. Ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1. 3 notifications went off in quick succession, filling 3 large segments of his experience bar. Wow, it actually counts. Area of effect attacks count toward kills? I'm practically exploiting a bug. Filled with excitement, he waved the swatter back and forth like playing badminton. Mosquitoes streamed toward the flashlight beam. Every swing produced crackling noises, and his experience bar climbed rapidly, far faster than hand swatting. Why did I torture myself swatting by hand earlier? Ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 ding. Blood, sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1 before long. A system alert echoed in his mind. Ding. You have reached level 2. +10 free attribute points. Holy crap, I leveled up already. He lowered the swatter and stepped back out of the mosquito cloud, quickly opening his character panel. A translucent blue, glowing interface floated before him, displaying updated stats. Player, Hao Yun level, 212 out of 200 class. None title, none spirit crystals, 0 strength, 5 agility, 5 constitution, 5 intelligence, 6 spirit, 7 luck, -15 free attribute points, 10 skills, none. His level rose from 1 to 2, and the experience requirement doubled to 200. Most noticeable were the 10 gleaming free attribute points. Nice, actual attribute points to assign. As a former game tester, he instinctively analyzed the panel. Strength boosts attack. Constitution improves health and survivability. Agility raises movement speed and evasion. Intelligence and spirit probably relate to future skills. He tapped the dim, gray luck, -15 line. It could not be modified at all. Damn it. I can't allocate points to luck. That's unfair. Still, he rationalized it. Luck was a special stat. Raising it would demand rare items, special weapons, or accessories. If players could freely invest points into luck, everyone would have maxed out luck. Knew there would be a catch. He sighed. Right now we are only fighting trivial pests like mosquitoes and rats. Extra strength hardly matters. 1. Hit or 2. Hit kills make little difference. Agility is far more useful. Fast hands speed up grinding. Fast reflexes will also help me dodge charging rats. Having made up his mind, he tapped agility. Its value jumped from 5 to 15. The instant the point assignment finished, a faint tingly sensation washed over him like a mild electric current. Warm energy flowed from his spine down to his fingertips. He waved the electric swatter. It felt incredibly light. Where he could once swing once slowly, he could now deliver 3 rapid strikes, as if under double speed. 10 points of agility, is this powerful? He stared in surprise. 5 points must equal average, adult human baseline. Tripling that turns me into some kind of speed-enhanced fighter. His grinding strategy was now perfected. The swatter whirled in his hands. Blue arcs fried swarms of mosquitoes. System notifications poured non-stop, and his experience bar surged. Mosquitoes barely reached the flashlight beam before they were eliminated. When the swatter's battery died, he fetched replacements from the convenience store. Once the grids overheated and blackened, he switched to insect killer spray, blasting clouds of mist that mowed down swarms and still granted experience. Ding. Level 3 reached. +10 free attribute points. Ding. Level 4 reached. +10 free attribute points. Ding. Level 5 reached. +10 free attribute points. Dawn broke, painting the outlines of the service area. Hao Yun leaned against the convenience, stored doorframe gasping. His swatter was practically overheating. The once dense red fog on the mini-map had thinned drastically. Almost all local mosquitoes were wiped out. He would need to travel far to find more prey. He opened his character panel and gaped at his progress. Player, Hao Yun level, 534 500 strength, 5 agility, 45 constitution, 5 intelligence, 6 spirit, 7 luck, -15 free attribute points, 0 skills, none 30 attribute points earned from 3 level. Ups had all gone into agility, pushing it to 45. 7 times the value of an ordinary adult male. He suspected he could run fast enough to keep pace with an electric scooter. It feels great, but my arms are killing me. He massaged his sore wrists and glanced toward the parking lot. Full daylight arrived. Sunlight glinted off bus roofs and car windshields, falling across the frozen, still figures of people by the service area entrance. None of them moved. The time freeze persisted without the slightest hint of ending. Still no sign of time resuming? How long is this supposed to last? His hope of waking up to a restored world was completely shattered. He squatted on the steps and bit into a ham sausage, thinking hard. Staying trapped in this small service area was no longer viable. Mosquitoes were nearly gone, leaving no more experience to farm. Though convenience, store supplies could sustain him for 10+ days, those supplies would run out eventually. If the whole world had permanently transformed into a game, hiding in this highway service station would leave him hopelessly outpaced. While others fought powerful monsters in cities and collected gear, he would still be swatting mosquitoes. He had to leave. He needed to head for the city. The idea excited him. Cities hosted huge supermarkets and shopping malls, overflowing with food, drink, and supplies to sustain him indefinitely. Most importantly, urban nooks and crannies bred countless mosquitoes and rats. Experience. Farming would accelerate exponentially compared with the service area. Right, I'm heading for the city. He jumped to his feet, tossed aside his half-eaten sausage, and hurried back into the convenience store to pack supplies. He stuffed mineral water, bread, ham sausages, and canned meat into his inventory until his 10-slot backpack was full. He also grabbed 2 large shopping bags. From household goods shelves, he added multiple cans of insect killer spray, 3 fully charged flashlights, and several folding stainless steel knives that he clipped to his waist. Prepared, he walked to the parking lot. Walking dozens of kilometers to the city was out of the question. Even boosted agility could not make that trip worthwhile. He pulled on car doors one after another. Bearing his -15 luck in mind, he expected dozens of locked vehicles before finding one usable. Sure enough, more than a dozen cars stayed locked tight despite his tiring tugs. Undaunted, he headed for the service station repair bay. Tools such as wrenches and screwdrivers would let him break a car window if necessary. Halfway there, he spotted an older black SUV parked in the corner of the lot. Its passenger side door stood slightly ajar, gaping by a finger width. Wow. He hurried over and pulled. The door clicked open. Against all odds, some good luck for a change? Peering inside, he grew even happier. The car key sat in the ignition, ready to turn. The fuel gauge read full. The vehicle could travel 700 kilometers on one tank. More than enough for the dozens-kilometer drive to the nearest city. Perfect a free ride. He tossed his supplies onto the back seat, slid into the driver's seat, and twisted the key. The engine hummed to life with no issues. He shifted gears, released the handbrake, steered out of the parking spot. Let's go. Time to head into the city and grind levels. He drove smoothly along the emergency lane. With the whole world frozen, traffic, law violations were irrelevant. Besides, this vehicle was merely scavenged transport. No trace would ever lead back to him. A few hours later, Hao Yun returned to his rental apartment. It was only a 20-square-meter single room with a separate toilet. The toilet adjoined the small kitchen, where Hao Yun sometimes cooked meals. But the apartment was no longer fit to live in. The power was cut off, and without the pumping system, the water supply had also failed. There was no way to flush the toilet. How could anyone stay here? He could hardly use bottled mineral water for that. That would be far too extravagant. He gathered his documents and luggage and headed straight for Four Seasons Hotel in the central CBD. High-end hotels like this usually had generators and large water storage tanks. Though supplies were limited, they would sustain him alone for 10 days or half a month. After successfully starting the generator in the power supply room, Hao Yun unlocked a presidential suite. The moment he pushed open the door, his eyes widened in amazement. The spacious 70 to 80 square meter suite featured a large living room furnished with leather sofas, a glass coffee table, decorative paintings on the walls, and an Italian-style coffee machine in the corner. Further inside lay the bedroom, dominated by an oversized double bed covered in snow, white down bedding that looked incredibly soft. The bathroom was fully tiled in marble, with double vanity sinks and a large built-in bathtub. Thick cotton bathrobes and slippers were neatly arranged on the shelf, alongside high-end toiletries from brands he had never even heard of. Wow, one night here would have cost me nearly half a month's salary back then. Hao Yun tossed his bag onto the sofa and threw himself onto the bed, rolling around. The plush mattress nearly bounced him upward. Compared with the hard wooden bed in his old rental unit, this was pure paradise. A life he had never dared to imagine had become reality, all thanks to the world time. Stop. Lying on his back, he stared up at the crystal chandelier on the ceiling and began mapping out his next moves. First, settle in at the hotel and scout out surrounding resource locations, convenience stores, supermarkets, and pharmacies. He needed to stockpile supplies to prepare for when time resumed. After that, he would grind experience. The city teemed with mosquitoes and rats, so he would level up as much as possible before the time stop ended. He could feel his physical power steadily rising, and he savored the rewards brought by leveling. Am I some kind of closed beta tester? 7 days passed. Perhaps due to human disappearance and halted carbon emissions, the moon shone brilliantly over the city at night, with sparse stars scattered across the sky. Before the floor-length mirror in the top-floor suite of Four Seasons Hotel, Hao Yun stood rigid, fully kitted out in heavy gear. He wore a full heavy-duty white hazmat suit, zipped from neck to ankle. Elastic straps tightly sealed the cuffs of his sleeves and trouser legs, leaving no gaps. A full face gas mask covered his head. Its transparent visor was spotlessly clean, with filter canisters hanging below his chin. Two sharpened stainless steel machetes crossed at his waist. On one side hung a portable spray bottle filled with disinfectant and insecticide. On the other, 3 bundles of cloth strips for ignition. On his back rested a heavy-duty agricultural sprayer filled with highly concentrated insecticide solution. Its long metal nozzle rested over his shoulder, ready to spray wide-range atomized poison at the press of a trigger. Though the whole setup looked cumbersome, his over 100 stat points and strength let him move without the slightest hindrance. Hao Yun studied his reflection in the mirror, looking like a professional disinfection worker. He tapped the visor of his gas mask and staged a pre-mission pep talk, playing both roles himself. "Are you ready?" He lowered his voice, imitating a commander's stern tone. After a 2-second pause, he replied in a firm, ringing voice, "Ready. Tonight's mission is critical. We must secure Sewer Unit 18 and eliminate all hostile creatures. Mission will be accomplished." He offered a sloppy salute toward the mirror and shouted, "Move out." Lowering his hand, he gazed at his own lonely figure in the glass. A hollow sense of desolation crept over him. The world time stop had lasted an entire week, with no sign of returning to normal. Frozen pedestrians still stood motionless on the streets. There was no sound, no conversation. In this vast city, he was the only living, thinking person left. Hao Yun had once thought he could easily endure loneliness. Growing up with few friends, he had always gotten by. But the time stop had proven him wrong. He was not as resilient to isolation as he had believed. With no one to talk to, he had begun talking to himself, using this ridiculous method to ease his solitude. "Move out." Hao Yun swung the spray hose and strode out. 2 turns down the hotel's back alley led to the Old Town district. The entrance to Sewer Unit 18 lay beneath a plane tree at the alley mouth. He lifted the heavy cast iron manhole cover. A wave of damp air thick with mildew and rot surged upward. Even through his gas mask, a sharp, fetid stench assaulted his senses. "Man, that's some powerful smell," he muttered, gripping the metal ladder and climbing down. As his feet touched the ground, his high-power flashlight swept across the surroundings. Walls, water, channel edges, and even mid-air swarmed with living creatures. Sewer Unit 18 connected to the entire underground network of the Old Town. His map blazed bright red across the whole area, marking hordes of mosquitoes, cockroaches, woodlice, and dozens of rats. Without hesitation, he twisted open the sprayer valve. High-pressure mist of thick white insecticide burst forth, spreading through the sewer tunnels. Creatures dropped like rain. Flying mosquitoes plummeted straight down, while clinging cockroaches flipped onto their backs and convulsed. Even woodlice hiding in stone crevices curled up and tumbled out. Ding. Blood-sucking mosquito slain. Experience +1. Ding. Cockroach slain. Experience +5. Ding. Woodlouse slain. Experience +2. Hao Yun turned into a relentless killing machine, frantically harvesting experience points. A short distance deeper into the tunnel, 7 or 8 half-grown mutated rats burst out. Panicked by the harsh chemical fumes, they squealed and scattered in every direction. Hao Yun barely glanced up. Holding the spray nozzle in his left hand, he reached into his waist holster with his right and pulled several sharply ground iron stakes. With a flick of his wrist, he threw them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Sharp whizzes cut through the air. The iron stakes flew true, piercing the backs of the fleeing rat skulls. The rodents did not even squeak before collapsing lifelessly into the sewage, twitching briefly. Ding. Rodent slain. Experience +50. Ding. Rodent slain. Experience +50. Ding. Rodent slain. Experience +50. 3 large experience notifications popped up in succession. Hao Yun nodded in satisfaction. Using this tactic, poison spray for small pests, thrown stakes for rats, he had grinded non-stop for a full week, raising his level from single digits all the way to level 37. The chemical fog filled the sewers all night. Bodies of insects and rats littered the tunnels. System notification chimes echoed non-stop, becoming background noise toward the small hours. By the time Hao Yun had mostly cleared the main passage of Sewer Unit 18, he checked his status panel. His level had climbed to 39, and his experience bar was partially filled. He had earned 20 free attribute points from 2 level ups. Instead of dumping all points into agility as he had early on, he distributed them evenly to develop across all stats. His agility already exceeded 100 points. He could complete the 100-meter dash in 2 to 3 seconds, far outperforming top sprinters. If he pushed himself, he could finish it in under 1 second. Grinded all night, killed at least 1,000 bugs and dozens of rats, and got nothing but experience. Hao-Yun kicked a large rat carcass at his feet and grumbled. Where are the skill books? Where's the gear? Even some healing potions would be nice. Did whoever created this game only code the experience system and forget to implement loot drops? Thinking about that unreliable god, he calmed down. Perhaps the item drop function had not yet been built. After all, a proper game world should have skills and equipment. Complaints aside, he had grown accustomed to it. He could always scavenge hardware, store supplies later, and modify his own weapons. With his boosted constitution, no animal could harm him now. When he climbed back above ground through the manhole cover, the eastern sky glowed pale with dawn. Sunlight streamed between high-rise buildings, casting warm light over the frozen pedestrians lining the streets. Though he had stayed awake all night, Hao-Yun felt little fatigue. After removing his gas mask, however, the stench of the sewer clung to his nostrils and would take time to fade. On his walk back to the hotel, living creatures began to appear in alleyways and green belts. Cats and dogs that had escaped from residential homes. During the 7 days of time, trapped pets had either broken windows to flee or starved indoors. Passing apartment buildings these past days, Hao-Yun had often heard miserable barking echoing through the dead city. But there was nothing he could do. He could not rescue every trapped pet across the whole city, nor could he feed so many animals even if he saved them. After all, he himself was still struggling to survive in this game-like world. As he walked through the Central Park, Hao-Yun paused. He pulled several ham sausages out of his backpack. 7 or 8 emaciated stray cats with visible rib bones crouched on the lawn. They did not run away as he approached, only watching him warily from a distance. Hao-Yun tore open the packaging, broke the sausages into pieces, and tossed them over. After a moment's hesitation, the cats darted forward and devoured the food ravenously. Eat up. He leaned against a park bench and watched them, murmuring to himself. Supermarkets are stacked full of these. I could never finish them all before they expire. Consider this compensation for all their kin I've killed lately. Over recent days, he had slain many feral cats and dogs that had turned aggressive. Driven mad by hunger or rapidly going wild without human presence, they posed threats. Hao-Yun had not forgotten. The god who created this world had multiplied biological growth and evolution speed by 500%. As he was tossing the third sausage when suddenly, roar! A deep, thunderous roar boomed from the woods deep inside the park. Leaves shook and fell from the trees, and the ground seemed to tremble faintly. The feeding cats instantly bristled, yowling and scattering into the shrubbery without looking back. Hey, a tiger's roar? Hao-Yun froze, staring toward the park's wooded interior. That was impossible. How could there be a tiger inside the city? He instinctively glanced at his mini-map. Deep in the park woods, a dark, red marker many times larger than the rat boss from the sewer was slowly moving toward him. Hao-Yun swallowed hard and slowly drew his machete from his waist, sweat dampening his palms. He had never encountered a tiger in real life. He had only heard tales of the fearsome king of beasts. Escaped house pets were one thing, but a tiger? It could not have come from the zoo, which was dozens of kilometers outside the city. Crunching branches and heavy panting drew closer. A massive shadow stepped out from behind the trees. Tawny fur marked with black stripes covered a body noticeably larger than a normal tiger. Its fangs glinted, and its cold eyes locked firmly on Hao-Yun. Amur Tiger, LV.3. Seeing the level label above its head, Hao-Yun relaxed at once. So it's just a small fry? He was level 39, while the tiger was only level 3, a gap of 36 levels, spanning nearly 3 major tiers. Even with the tiger's natural physical advantages, such an enormous level difference meant fighting it would be little more than crushing an oversized cat. It must have escaped from the suburban zoo and killed a few small animals along the way to hit level 3. If it understood how to farm experience and slaughtered every animal in the zoo, it would easily be level 20 or higher by now. Pity. No animal possessed humanity's capacity for killing. If animals knew killing granted experience, humans would slay every living creature. Hao-Yun was proof of that. He had killed insects and vermin only because they granted easy experience. Without experience rewards, he would never have attacked those creatures at all. Those stray cats he was feeding might well have become his targets otherwise. Lost in these thoughts, the tiger did not wait. It pushed off the ground with its hind legs and lunged toward him, carrying a wave of foul-smelling wind. The sheer size of the charging beast was genuinely intimidating. A random thought crossed Hao-Yun's mind. He wondered what Wusong must have felt fighting a tiger on Jingyang Ridge. Maybe Wusong had also been a cheater who secretly leveled up? The thought barely passed before the tiger was right in front of him. In that instant, time slowed down for Hao Yun. The tiger's bared fangs, whipping tail, and tensed muscles all unfolded in slow motion, every movement crystal clear. This was the benefit of high agility. His nervous system processed information far faster than ordinary humans. The tiger's movements looked no quicker than a playback slowed down for observation. He reached out with perfect precision and grabbed the tiger by the scruff of its neck. He could see pure shock in the tiger's wide eyes. It had probably never met a human capable of catching its pounce bare-handed. Even more disorienting awaited the beast. Using the momentum of its leap, Hao Yun twisted his wrist and slammed the tiger downward. Boom! A heavy thud rang out. The 3-meter-long big cat crashed hard onto the stone pavement, sending up clouds of dust and bouncing small gravel. Hao Yun stepped forward and sat firmly on the tiger's neck, striking exactly the pose depicted in old illustrations of Wusong slaying the tiger. He raised his fist, intending to beat some sense into the reckless beast. But halfway through his swing, he saw complete terror in the tiger's eyes. Its ferocity vanished, replaced by sheer fright. Its fur alternately bristled and flattened, and its 4 limbs trembled. It understood that the human before it existed on an entirely different power level. A full force blow would kill it instantly. The tiger no longer dared roar. Instead, it let out soft, whimpering sounds much like a kitten, begging for mercy. Hao Yun realized his own strength, over 100 stat points, was more than enough to punch straight through walls. If his fist connected with the tiger's skull, it would die immediately. Crack! Hao Yun diverted his blow, smashing his fist against the flagstone right beside the tiger's head. Spider web cracks spread instantly across the stone slab, which shattered into several pieces. Gravel sprayed everywhere, dust billowing over his face. The tiger went rigid. Its intended snarl died in its throat, replaced by soft whimpers. Its legs turned weak beneath it, tail tucked tight, ears flattened backward. It no longer looked anything like the mighty king of beasts. Hao Yun shook his hand and stood up from the tiger's neck. He looked down at the huge creature and felt a flicker of awe. He knew his 100-plus strength was formidable, but he had not expected it to be this devastating. A direct blow to the tiger's skull would have smashed its head to pulp without any chance of survival. That all you've got? Hao Yun nudged the tiger's paw with his foot and scoffed. You roared so fiercely earlier. Turns out you're just a level 3 small fry? He used to watch tigers on television and think them utterly lethal, certain death for any unarmed human. Things were different now. At level 39, he ranked the tiger by 36 levels. The gap was greater than an adult facing a newborn infant. He could have subdued 3 such tigers bare-handed if needed. From the feel of their brief clash, he estimated the tiger's base stats were roughly equivalent to a level 17 human player. Good grief. Even at level 3, its stats match a human level 17. Imagine how overpowered it would become if it kept growing. Hao Yun could not help but feel pessimistic for humanity's future. All right, cut the act. Hao Yun nudged its head with his foot. Get lost. Go back to where you came from. Don't wander around the city biting people. If I run into you again, you won't get off so easy. The tiger lifted its eyelids, glanced timidly at him, and slowly got to its feet. Instead of running off right away, it stepped forward. Its cool, damp nose rubbed against Hao Yun's trouser leg, acting as if it were currying favor. Hao Yun froze for a moment, then chuckled. What's this? Trying to latch onto me because you can't win a fight? I can't afford to keep you. You'd go through tons of meat every meal, and I have to ration my own food. Perhaps the evolutionary directives from the god had taken effect. Hao Yun could clearly tell the tiger had grown much smarter, about as intelligent as a dog. At the very least, it knew to seek out strength. Hao Yun had thought a few stern warnings would send the tiger scurrying off with its tail between its legs. But as he turned and headed toward the hotel, after walking 100-odd meters, he looked back. The tiger trailed roughly 10 meters behind him, moving along at a leisurely pace. When he stopped, it crouched down. When he walked, it followed. He could not shake it off. Wait a minute. Are you sticking to me? Hao Yun planted his hands on his hips and called back. I don't have extra meat to feed you. Go back to your zoo. The tiger squatted in place and swished its thick tail. It would not draw nearer, nor would it run away. It just stared at him with round eyes, looking almost aggrieved. Hao Yun held its gaze for a long while before he finally gave in. Truth be told, being alone for this past week had nearly driven him stir-crazy. He kept carrying on imaginary conversations with himself, and he was on the verge of losing his mind. Having another living being nearby, even a tiger that could not talk, was at least someone to listen. It was better than talking to thin air. Fine, fine. I guess I'm out of luck. Hao Yun waved his hand in surrender. You can tag along. But let's get one thing straight. Food is provided, lodging is not. Find somewhere outside to sleep on your own. If you dare sneak into my hotel room, I'll toss you off the top floor. The tiger seemed to understand. It let out a low rumble, trotted forward quickly, and rubbed its big head against his leg. Its tail whipped about joyfully, with none of the dignity befitting the king of beasts. Look at you, no pride at all. Hao Yun pushed its head away in exasperation. I can't keep calling out to you without a name. Let's give you one. You carry yourself with such airs, so I'll name you Lord Chongping. Sounds like some important figure. Paying no mind whether the tiger understood, he settled on the name. Then a thought crossed his mind, and he pulled an entire slab of frozen pork out of his system backpack. He had hauled this from the cold storage section of a downtown supermarket when he first arrived in the city. He had stuffed several slabs into the backpack back then, planning to eat them slowly. By chance, he had discovered a hidden feature of the system backpack. Items inside were kept perfectly preserved. Whatever state they went in was exactly how they came out. Nothing spoiled or went rotten, not even a speck of ice melted. Essentially, the backpack was an infinitely large super refrigerator that used no power. He set the pork on the ground. Wispy cold steam rose from it. Lord Chongping's eyes lit up at once. It sniffed the meat, then glanced up at Hao Yun. When Hao Yun nodded, it lowered its head and began eating ravenously. Slow down. No one's competing with you. Hao Yun leaned against a nearby tree and watched. Only this backpack keeps food frozen. With your appetite, the meat would rot in a few days otherwise. I really couldn't keep you. From that day onward, Hao Yun had an inseparable big sidekick. Life changed completely. Before, clearing the sewers at night meant he alone carried a sprayer charging into the dark. Amid constant system notification chimes, all he heard were his own footsteps and his own muttering. The loneliness was suffocating. Now Lord Chongping came with him. Though only level 3, it handled ordinary rats and cockroaches effortlessly. One paw strike or bite killed them instantly, drastically boosting their monster farming efficiency. Hao Yun sprayed pesticide to exterminate pests up front, while Lord Chongping chased down fleeing rodents behind him. Man and tiger worked in surprisingly good sync. During breaks, Hao Yun would sit on the edge of the sewer and chat to it. Lord Chongping would lie beside him, tail swaying lazily. Every now and then it would let out a low rumble, as if responding. They still could not hold real conversations, yet it was far better than talking to empty air. Hao Yun noticed he talked to himself far less, though he had grown rather chatty. Days were quieter during daytime. Hao Yun still brought sausages to feed stray cats in the town square park. At first, the feral cats were terrified of Lord Chongping. They bolted faster than rabbits and hid behind trees, too afraid to show themselves. After repeated encounters, they realized the huge tiger paid them no mind. It only napped at Hao Yun's feet, barely lifting its eyes to glance their way. Gradually the cats grew bold enough to come near and snatch sausages from Hao Yun's hands. Lord Chongping would sit there basking in sunlight, its massive body curled up. Though it looked ferocious, it behaved very gently. Time drifted by unhurriedly. 3 months slipped past. The time-stop phenomenon still showed no sign of ending. People on the streets remained frozen in the poses they had held 3 months prior. Tiny weeds sprouted from cracks in the pavement. One morning Hao Yun got up to brush his teeth. He twisted the faucet handle, and only a gurgling sound came out. Not a single drop flowed. He stared in surprise and tried the bathroom shower. Nothing came out either. The rooftop water tank had finally run completely dry. This had been foreseen. Over the past 2 weeks, water pressure had dwindled day by day. Today marked the total depletion. Hao Yun did not panic too much. He had long stopped drinking tap water. Water tanks in other hotels and residential districts across the city had sat unused for 3 months. They were stagnant pools covered in green algae, reeking and undrinkable. For weeks he had survived on large bottled water hauled from supermarkets. Rationed carefully, his supply would last a while, but it was not a long-term solution. The city was no longer a viable place to stay. Lord Chongping. Hao Yun called toward the hotel lobby. The large tiger, which had been napping on an old carpet he had laid out as its bed by the entrance, lifted its head sharply. Its ears pricked straight up, and golden eyes locked precisely onto him. 3 months had transformed Lord Chongping from that weak level 3 creature. Constant sewer patrols and street monster hunts alongside Hao Yun had raised it all the way to level 18. Its body had grown substantially. Its paws were as big as a human face. When it lay still, it exuded the imposing aura of a true king of beasts. Only around Hao Yun did it act like an affectionate big cat, its tail tip flicking gently as it waited for instructions. Gather our things. We're leaving. Hao Yun kicked an empty water bucket at his feet. We can't stay in the city anymore. We're heading for the countryside. There was not much to pack. All important belongings were already stored in the system backpack. Weapons, food, medicine, all kinds of tools. With every level, up over these 3 months, the backpack's capacity expanded. It now held well over 100 storage slots, crammed full of supplies. He double-checked his remaining dozen, odd large water jugs, and the frozen meat stockpiled for Lord Chongping. Making sure nothing was left behind, he grabbed his machete and headed downstairs. As he pushed open the hotel's revolving door, Hao Yun paused. Streets that had been neat and orderly 3 months ago were unrecognizable. Dense weeds burst through cracks in the asphalt, some growing knee-high, rustling in the wind. Plain trees along the road grew wildly, branches sprawling across roadways, tangling and bending street lamps. Dark green vines crawled up the facades of skyscrapers, wrapping around most glass curtain walls. Broken billboards lay half, buried in weeds, their lettering smothered by moss. From afar, the urban concrete jungle was being swallowed bit by thriving greenery. At this rate, within a year or two, these tall buildings would be entirely encased in plants, turned into green hills buried within the wilderness. Only 3 months, and look at this. Hao Yun kicked at tall green foxtail grass beside his feet. The system was not exaggerating about ecological reconstruction. If we stay any longer, weeds will trap us right here. Hao Yun himself was now level 63. Leveling had been fast over the first 40 levels. Killing sewer insects and street stray beasts filled his experience bar rapidly. Past level 50, however, required exponentially more experience. Reaching level 63 meant he needed over 1 million experience points for each subsequent level. Killing mosquitoes and cockroaches barely gave 1 or 2 experience points apiece. He could grind them until next year and barely fill a sliver of his bar. Even rats only granted a few dozen points, hardly making a difference. The era of quick leveling by slaughtering small pests was over. Remaining in the city served no purpose. Supplies would hold out for some time, but water was a fatal weakness. The countryside offered far more promise. There were mountains, rivers, and farmland. Settling beside clean running water would solve drinking water and allow crop planting, a much more sustainable long-term plan. Instead of heading straight out of town, Hao Yun turned toward the hotel underground parking garage. He pushed open the heavy fire-proof door. Beneath dim emergency lights, rows of shiny vehicles sat neatly parked. Luxury sedans, sports cars, large displacement off-road vehicles, all kinds of high-end cars filled a large section of the garage. Over these 3 months, he had collected them from upscale residential compounds and car dealerships across the city. In the old world, merely sitting behind the wheel of a BMW would have made him want to post about it online, thinking he had hit life's peak. Now, surrounded by a whole garage of luxury vehicles with keys hanging on hooks on the wall for whichever he wanted to drive, he felt hardly any excitement. I used to scrape by just to afford a car part, and now I've got unlimited access to luxury cars. Hao Yun kicked the tire of a nearby Porsche and huffed. Shame the world ended. He could not possibly take all these vehicles to the countryside. After a moment's thought, he stored a modified heavy-duty off-road vehicle and 1 sleek sports car into his system backpack. Though the backpack had expanded greatly in recent months, it could not hold countless hunks of metal. He kept 2 as mementos, in case he encountered smooth pavement somewhere down the line. The rest of the luxury cars would be left behind to gather dust and rust. Sorry I can't take you all with me. Hao Yun patted the hood of a BMW and joked. Roads out there are overgrown. In 3 or 5 years, trees will probably grow right through the pavement. Once roads are gone, even these fancy cars will be nothing but scrap metal. Indeed, after only 3 months, asphalt roads were already being broken apart by weeds. If ecological reconstruction continued unchecked, city roads would be completely buried by vegetation within a few years. Not even a tank could get through, let alone sports cars. Objects once prized by the wealthy were worth far less in this survival game than jugs of water and sacks of rice. Lord Chongping followed him into the garage. It showed zero interest in the shiny metal shells. It found a clean spot, lay down, and yawned, swishing its thick tail as if urging him to hurry. All right, I'm going. Hao Yun climbed into the driver's seat of a heavy box truck. Lord Chongping slowly stepped up the rear loading ramp and lay down inside the cargo hold. Its immense weight visibly compressed the vehicle's suspension. There was no other choice. After months of fighting, Lord Chongping had gained more than a dozen levels. It was nearly half again larger than an ordinary adult Amur tiger, weighing well over 400 kilograms. Faint dark red stripes ran along its tawny fur, making it look far more menacing than before. Ordinary sedans and sports cars could never bear its weight. Even large SUVs would sag under it. Only this heavy-duty cargo truck could contain this giant beast. Hao Yun turned the key. The truck rumbled to life and rumbled out over waist-high weeds toward the city outskirts. Conditions worsened the further he drove. Asphalt was cracked and broken by weeds. Fallen tree trunks and thick shrubs blocked many stretches of road. Fortunately, the truck had high ground clearance. Any other vehicle would have gotten stuck. Without navigation software, travel was troublesome. Road signs still remained intact, or Hao Yun would have lost his way entirely. It felt bittersweet to think about it. It had been almost a year since he had been home. Both his parents had passed away in recent years. He had no real reason to return to the village. He had scraped by in the city working as a game tester, barely earning enough to cover rent and loan repayments. Ashamed to face villagers with his mediocre life, he visited home less and less, eventually not returning at all for full years. Who would have guessed that while he went about his ordinary job, the world would transform into a game? He had once struggled desperately to put down roots in the city, and now he was fleeing back to his hometown. After 4 or 5 hours of bumpy travel, the truck reached the village entrance. Rural decay was even more striking than urban decay. Farmland lay abandoned, overgrown with weeds taller than a person, stretching out in endless green wilderness. Cracked village cement roads were filled with weeds. Drainage ditches were choked by vines. Morning glories and climbing vines covered courtyard walls, and many earthen wall sections had crumbled. Seemingly because spilled grain from untended fields fed them, bird numbers were abundant. Flocks of sparrows and turtle doves pecked among the weeds. As the truck drove past, hundreds took flight all at once. Occasionally, he spotted frozen villagers along the way. Some held hoes mid-stride toward the fields. Some squatted on stone benches at the village entrance chatting, smiles still frozen on their faces, exactly as they had been 3 months prior. Hao Yun's heart sank. He did not linger, driving deeper into the village. His family home stood at the far end of the village next to the back mountain. Isolated and quiet, it made an ideal base. The truck halted at the gate. Hao Yun jumped out and stared at the familiar, yet unfamiliar wooden door, hesitating before reaching for it. The old wooden gate paint had peeled away from wind and sun. Its metal knocker was spotted with rust. The low courtyard wall was covered in pumpkin vines, nearly spilling over the top. In the old days, his father would trim weeds and prune branches every month to keep everything neat. Left untended for merely 3 months, the place had gone wild. "Come on, we're home." He pushed the gate open. It creaked loudly. Green foxtail grass sprouted through gaps in the flagstone path, and wild mushrooms grew around piles of debris in the corners. Lord Chongping jumped down from the truck cargo hold. It strode into the yard, sniffing the air everywhere, then settled down against a sun-warmed wall, tail swaying contentedly. It clearly approved of this place. Wow, if I'd stayed away another 2 months, I might not even find the front door. Hao Yun tossed his backpack onto the ground and rolled up his sleeves to get to work. Seeing Lord Chongping lazing about, Hao Yun grumbled, "You sure know how to relax." He shot the tiger a glance, pulled 2 sickles out of his backpack, and tossed one down beside it. "Get up and help. You get fed, so you can't just lie around doing nothing." Lord Chongping lifted its eyelids, flicked its tail, and did not move an inch. "Fine, you win. Lucky for you, you're supposed to be protected wildlife." Not really expecting the tiger to do manual labor, Hao Yun picked up his own sickle and started cutting weeds. The vegetation grew thick and deep, rooted, making cutting difficult. Thanks to his high level granting him great strength, he could yank many plants out entirely by the roots. He spent the whole afternoon clearing the courtyard. Flagstone paving stones were exposed. He filled gaps with stones he collected nearby. He also cleared the vegetable beds his father had built long ago. They were full of fallen leaves and rotten grass. With more work tomorrow, they could be planted again. Next came repairing the house. Rain had leaked through gaps in the main house roof for months, leaving mold growing on interior corners. He repositioned roof tiles and plugged holes with broken shards. It would not keep out torrential downpours, but it would hold against light rain. That was not all. He needed to cook. In the city, Hao Yun survived on instant noodles, canned food, and ready-to-eat meals. Back home, he wanted to cook properly. Power was long gone, so electric rice cookers were useless. He would rely on the old rural brick stove. The kitchen stove had sat unused for over a year. Cobwebs draped inside, and 2 bricks had fallen out around the fire opening. Hao Yun mixed mud to seal the cracks. By sunset, the stove was functional again. He also tidied the main house. He swept dust off floors and shook out old bedding from the beds. Though worn, they would serve well enough once sun dried. Rummaging through cabinets, he unearthed old belongings. His childhood cotton, padded jacket, a pair of cloth shoes his mother had hand-stitched, an enamel mug his father had used for over a decade, and stacks of his old-school textbooks. Hao Yun stared at that finished pair of cloth shoes for a long moment. His mother had been skilled at needlework and used to make shoes for him. He had rarely worn them after leaving for city school, yet these had been preserved all along. He sighed and neatly returned everything to the cabinet. I always dreamed of coming home having made something of myself. Now look, I accomplished nothing, and the world has ended. Melancholy aside, he still needed food. As dusk fell, smoke curled out of the chimney for the first time in over a year. Hao Yun squatted beside the stove, tending the fire. In the pot simmered cured pork rice he had brought from the city, rice mixed with diced cured meat and dried vegetables. Fresh fruits and vegetables are hard to come by. Tomorrow I'll check farmland outside the village for wild, edible greens. Lord Chongping had been lying by the gate. It perked up the moment it smelled food, craning its long neck toward the stove. Its tail swept back and forth across the ground, scattering dust over the newly cleaned floor. Don't get your hopes up. None of this is for you. Hao Yun filled a large bowl for himself, then cut a big chunk of frozen pork from his backpack and tossed it over. Make do with this for tonight. Once we finish tidying up tomorrow, we'll go look for wild game. Lord Chongping clamped onto the meat and ate heartily. Hao Yun sat on the threshold, stirring the rice in his bowl and glancing up at the sky. Out in the countryside, the night sky turned pitch black, and the stars shone far brighter than they did in the city. All around lay utter stillness, broken only by the chirp of insects and Changpingjun's crunching noises as it ate meat. Still, Hao Yun had long grown accustomed to loneliness. Ever since his parents had passed away one after another, no one had kept close company with him. After finishing his meal, Hao Yun heated some hot water and gave himself a quick sponge bath. He had worked non-stop all day, sweating and covered in grime. When he lay down on the bed, the wooden planks felt hard and unyielding, nothing like the soft beds in hotels. Yet being in this familiar place filled his heart with a strange sense of security. He opened his system panel with a quick glance. His level remained at 63, and his experience bar had barely moved. He had spent the whole day doing chores and had not slain a single monster. No rush. Hao Yun yawned and rolled over. I'll get my home sorted out first. There will be plenty of time to grind monsters later. He then slowly closed his eyes and muttered under his breath. When will this stop finally come to an end? Early the next morning, Hao Yun was woken by a cacophony of bird calls. Coos, chirps, and trills of all kinds of wild birds seeped through the window cracks. The racket was so loud he could not fall back asleep. He sat up rubbing his eyes. Dawn had barely broken outside. As he was about to throw off the quilt and get out of bed, his gaze drifted toward the window, and he caught sight of a lively scene unfolding in the courtyard. Flocks of wild birds of all sizes perched on the jujube tree, atop the courtyard wall, and hopped across the flagstone pecking at grass seeds. Changpingjun lowered its body in irritation, its chest rumbling, and let out a short, sharp tiger roar. Roar! The low sound rolled across the whole courtyard. In the next instant, a huge flock of birds flapped their wings in panic. They surged into the air, circled a few times, then flew off toward the edge of the village. In the blink of an eye, the courtyard fell quiet, save for a few stray feathers drifting down. He had already noticed the overwhelming number of birds out in the countryside when he drove into the village the day before. Birds naturally reproduced quickly. Under normal circumstances, they could hatch a clutch of chicks roughly every half-month. Now the world was undergoing ecological reconstruction. Empowered by the force of that unknown god, their breeding rate had skyrocketed, free from the restraints of natural laws. The rice paddies surrounding the village had already been completely devoured by these birds. Bare rice stalks stood empty in the fields, yielding no grain at all. Even so, Hao Yun had no intention of hunting these wild birds. Everything had its pros and cons. While swarms of birds ruined crops, they also hunted snakes, insects, and mosquitoes, naturally keeping pest numbers in check. It functioned as a simple form of biological pest control. Over those 3 months in the city, he had sprayed pesticides non-stop to kill mosquitoes. And he had uncovered a chilling truth. Mosquitoes kept evolving. Some had grown as thick as thumbs, their bites far more dangerous. Infuriatingly, killing them still only granted 1 experience point. The cost-to-reward ratio was abysmally low. Hao Yun no longer joked that the god was bad at game design. In merely 3 months, Mosquitoes had undergone obvious evolution. If this trend held, what would they become a year or 10 years from now? He could hardly imagine. Giant mosquitoes the size of bats might well appear someday. At that point, wiping them out with a sprayer would be nothing but wishful thinking. That made the idea of using birds to keep insect swarms in check all the more important. Hao Yun quickly pulled on his durable field uniform and pushed open the door to step outside. Bird feathers littered the flagstones of the yard, mixed with a few tiny bird bones. Obviously, Changpingjun had already finished its breakfast on its own. Changpingjun, let's go. We're heading up the back mountain. We'll hunt some game to improve our meals. Hao Yun grabbed a machete at his waist and slung a compound bow over his back. He had looted this bow from an urban shooting range. It was exquisitely built and would have cost tens of thousands of currency in the old days. He had also stockpiled plenty of arrows, perfect for long-range sneak attacks. He decided against wearing protective gear. Thick mountain vegetation would make it cumbersome. Changpingjun had been waiting impatiently, pacing back and forth in the yard. The back mountain of Hejiao village was a stretch of rolling mountains covered in dense jungle. In the old days when life was hard, many villagers would head up the mountain to pick wild mushrooms and trap hares. With luck, they might even spot lone wild boars. No one had ever heard of bears or large tigers living there. Man and tiger followed the mountain trail deeper into the hills. They ran across plenty of hares and pheasants along the way. Rather than close quarters fighting, Hao Yun drew his compound bow, knocked arrows, and shot from dozens of meters away. His agility stat was maxed out, and his eyesight was razor sharp. Almost every time the bowstring twanged, a hare in the distance dropped, barely twitching. Changpingjun trotted over, grabbed the prey, shook it to confirm it was dead, and dropped it beside the path to collect later. Human and tiger worked together with seamless coordination. That teamwork had been forged over 3 months of monster hunting. Less than an hour later, 5 or 6 fat hares and 3 large pheasants lay piled beside the trail. Enough food to last them for several days. Hao Yun had intended to press deeper into the mountains. But when he glanced up the hillside, he froze in his tracks. Halfway up the slope, nestled among trees, stood the old mountain temple he had known since childhood. In the past, the temple had been falling apart. Most of its surrounding walls had crumbled. Only half a rotting wooden door remained, and the roof leaked rain. Very few people came to burn incense, even during festivals. As a boy, he had once taken shelter from heavy rain inside. The clay idol had been missing one arm, and cobwebs hung thicker than curtains. Yet the mountain temple before him had changed completely. The old crumbling walls still stood, but where the temple gate ought to be floated a faint blue light membrane. Exactly like a dungeon portal from a single-player video game. Even stranger, the glowing portal was misaligned with the original gate. The old wooden doorframe leaned crookedly, while the square blue portal hovered half a foot offset. Rough stone jutted out on one side, and the glowing membrane hung suspended in mid-air. The shoddy stitching was painfully obvious. Right then, a chime sounded inside his head, and a system notification popped up. Discovered unfinished dungeon, ruined mountain temple. Dungeon status, unfinished. Available entries. 1. Enter immediately? Damn, it really is a dungeon. He stepped forward a couple paces and nearly laughed out loud staring at the horribly misaligned doorframe. Are you kidding me? Couldn't you have put in a little more work making this game? You just slapped a skin onto an existing mountain temple and called it a dungeon. Look how skewed the gate is. The textures aren't even lined up. The collision box must be clipping through the walls. He had worked as a game tester for years, and these half-finished bugs were all too familiar to him. It was classic rushed reskin work. They had dropped the scene model straight onto real-world architecture without calibrating placement. Clipping, misaligned textures, broken terrain stitching, all low-level mistakes. Back when he reviewed projects, he would have sent a dungeon of this quality back to designers to redo 8 times over. Changpingjun growled low at the blue light, its back slightly arched, clearly on guard. Its instincts told it that this glowing thing was dangerous. It's all right. It's just a game dungeon. Hao Yun patted its neck. Sure, it's poorly built, but it's a dungeon. Dungeons have elite monsters, bosses, and treasure chests. We barely get any loot from regular wild monsters. Maybe here we'll score equipment and skill books. Excited as he was, he did not rush to enter. He circled the mountain temple twice. He was now fully convinced that this world's game system was incomplete. Global time. Stop felt like forcing open a closed beta test. The loot system was imperfect. Life, skill professions had not even been implemented, and now even dungeons were shoddy, unfinished work full of flaws. Standing before the light membrane, Hao Yun reached out and brushed against the blue glow. A translucent panel popped up before his eyes, displaying four neatly arranged options. Normal difficulty, hard difficulty, epic difficulty, legendary difficulty. Higher difficulty means better rewards, right? Haoyan folded his arms and muttered to himself. If he picked normal, he would probably get worthless junk and waste his one and only chance to enter the dungeon. If he picked legendary, rewards would be the greatest, yet the risk would also be highest. What if he faced foes akin to primordial gods? He would be dead meat. If the game's level cap was 100, level 63 was respectable, but this system was notoriously unreliable. A bug could multiply a boss's stats tenfold, and he would walk in to get slaughtered. Worse still, he could only enter once. There was no going back if he chose wrong. Going in normally isn't smart. Who knows what waits inside? Haoyan stroked his chin. His eyes drifted to the narrow gap where the light membrane pulled away from the stone wall, and an idea sparked. Why use the main entrance at all? There's a bug right here. As a game tester with years of experience, it would be a professional disgrace not to exploit an obvious map flaw. Using the official portal consumed his entry count. If he glitched in through the crack, would that not count as a formal entry? He could scout the interior first, figure out what lay within, and decide on a difficulty afterward. He acted at once. He motioned for Champingjun to stay back, then squeezed sideways toward the half-foot gap between the light membrane and stone wall. A normal human could never fit through such a narrow opening, but his high agility made his body lithe. He held his breath and wriggled through. Amazingly, he slipped right into the dungeon. He quickly looked around. He had expected a temple shrine or rooms filled with monsters. Instead, the scene took him completely by surprise. He stood inside a vast underground palace. A tiny mountain temple concealed this grand underground hall. Dozens of huge stone pillars lined both sides, carved with strange patterns. The ground was paved with smooth bluestone slabs. At the far end, steps rose toward a stone throne. The entire palace was empty. Not a single monster, not even a spiderweb could be seen. What's going on? Haoyan stared in confusion and took a few steps forward, scanning everywhere. Where are the mobs? Where are the elites? Is this dungeon just empty? He walked all over the great hall, checking every nook and cranny. Not even a rat scurried about. Side chambers were completely bare, devoid of furnishings. The walls were plain and bare, like a newly built building before decoration. I cannot believe this. Haoyan planted his hands on his hips in the middle of the hall, half amused and half exasperated. So the god really rushed this job. They built the dungeon shell and the difficulty selection interface, but forgot to put any monsters inside. They loaded the map model, yet never spawned NPCs or foes. It was unbelievably slapdash. He had hoped to fight waves of monsters, earn plenty of experience, and open treasure chests for gear. Instead, he found nothing but stone. Not a shred of experience to gain. Just as he prepared to head back out, convinced his trip had been for nothing, his peripheral vision caught sight of the throne at the far end. Haoyan's eyes lit up. He hurried up the steps and drew near the throne. There really was a treasure chest. He circled it and knocked on the wood. A dull thud suggested something lay inside. All right, no monsters, but at least they remembered the treasure chest. Haoyan rubbed his hands together, yet doubts crept in. Wait, normally you beat the boss before opening the chest. Can I really just walk up and take it? Could this be a trap? Or another bug chest that turns out empty? This dungeon was riddled with bugs. Who knew if this chest was leftover test content that might blow open when touched? Haoyan took a deep breath and set his hand on the chest lid. I've come this far. I'm not leaving empty-handed. Good or bad, I'll find out when I open it. His hand touched the cool copper trim. Before he could lift the lid, another translucent panel flashed before his eyes. The four options were identical to the difficulty selection screen at the entrance. Please select dungeon difficulty, normal, hard, epic, legendary. Huh? Why is this popping up again? Haoyan froze for a second, then slapped his thigh as realization dawned. This was not merely selecting dungeon difficulty. This was selecting reward tiers. The intended process was, enter through the main gate, pick a difficulty, fight monsters of matching strength, defeat the boss, and unlock the corresponding tier of treasure chest. By glitching through the wall, he had skipped every battle. The system's logic was incomplete, and it judged him to have cleared the dungeon. Now it offered him his reward tier. Free high-grade loot without fighting? Are you serious? Haoyan grinned widely, rubbing his hands in excitement. I thought I would get nothing. The big prize was waiting for me after all. There was no need to hesitate. Normal and hard were meant for low-level beginners, granting at most rations and shoddy ironware. Epic might yield decent blue-grade equipment. Since there was zero risk, he would go all the way to the top. No question, pick legendary difficulty. Without hesitation, he tapped the legendary difficulty option. Only this unfinished bug-ridden dungeon could offer such an opportunity. Once the god fixed the glitches, chances for risk, free top-tier rewards would vanish forever. The moment his finger tapped the option, the dull wooden chest hummed and trembled. Brilliant golden light burst forth, bathing the entire underground palace in warm yellow radiance. It's golden. True legendary loot. The chest lid lifted on its own. A fist-sized, nearly transparent jet. Black flame drifted slowly out, hovering in mid-air. Just fire? Black fire at that. Hao Yun's smile faded. He leaned forward and frowned at the tiny flame, thoroughly disappointed. Seriously? Legendary difficulty gives me this. I expected powerful weapons or high-rank skill books. And all I get is fire? That's such a letdown. He had braced for magnificent rare gear, only to receive this unimpressive wisp of flame. Disappointment washed over him. Before he could finish complaining, a flurry of system notifications chimed in his head. Ding! Legendary. Difficulty treasure chest opened successfully. Ding! Obtained unique special item. Devouring Void Flame Spark. Item name. Devouring Void Flame level. LV1 rarity. Unique legendary attributes. Divine power plus 20 exclusive skill. Devour. Devour. May devour all forms of energy, enemy attacks, and other flames to grow in strength. In combat, it can silently reduce foes, burning away both flesh and energy. Nothing fails to burn in its presence. It grows stronger against greater power. For a long moment after the prompt ended, Hao Yun stood dumbfounded, staring at the words, unique legendary. His mind buzzed. Holy hell. He swore under his breath, rubbed his eyes hard, and looked again. The text on the panel remained unchanged. Unique legendary. An offensive flame spark with its own exclusive skill. It could devour enemy attacks, consume other flames to level up, and burn foes completely out of existence. This was a divine artifact. I've struck gold. I've really struck gold this time. He took a deep breath and cautiously stretched out his hand toward the dark, red flame wisp. The moment his fingertips drew near, the devouring void flame flowed into his body through his fingers. Hao Yun distinctly felt a new presence moving inside him. Moments later, he was teleported out of the dungeon. Changpingjun, come here. I've got something to show you. He waved over the waiting tiger. Focusing his mind, he raised his right palm. A nearly transparent jet, black flame drifted out from his fingertips, swirling above his open hand. The flame looked unremarkable and gave off no heat. The second it appeared, Changpingjun's fur stood on end. It leaped backward 2 large paces, eyes wide with instinctive dread. Look at you. This is mine. It won't burn you. Hao Yun shook his head in amusement and soothed it. Relax, I have it under control. You won't get hurt. Though he spoke confidently, he himself was fascinated by the flame. He waved his hand, and the devouring void flame shot forward, landing squarely on an old locust tree beside the mountain temple. The black, transparent flame sank into the trunk like water soaking into sand, wrapping the whole tree. Hao Yun watched in awe as the trunk, as thick as a bowl, dried and dissolved before his eyes. Bark, trunk, branches, and leaves vanished without a single spark, like snow melting in hot water. In less than half a minute, the entire tree was gone. Not even ash or wood chips remained. The ground was smooth, as if the tree had never existed at all. Whoa, that's terrifyingly powerful. Hao Yun could not help exclaiming. He had seen mountain fires before. Even those always left charcoal behind. The devouring void flame consumed everything completely, leaving nothing behind. Unleashed against monsters, foes would vanish on contact. He would not even need to dispose of corpses afterward, perfect for eliminating traces and survival out in the wild. He focused his will, and the black flame drifted back, slipping into his fingertips and settling quietly in his dantian. Hao Yun sat down on a clean boulder and eagerly opened his system panel. When the flame had merged with him, the notification had mentioned Divine Power plus 20. He had never seen that stat before, and he wanted to understand what Divine Power meant, to see if it lived up to its unique legendary rank. Strength, 112 Constitution, 198 Agility, 137 Intelligence, 76 Spirit, 89 Luck, -15. At the bottom of the list, a brand new attribute glowed with golden text, clearly superior to ordinary stats. Divine Power, 20 Divine Power? Hao Yun stroked his chin and pondered. A bold thought crossed his mind. Could this be power capable of harming gods? The notion stunned him. Ever since time had frozen and the world had turned game. Like He had assumed a god, like being stood behind everything. For 3 months he had mocked that being for shoddy game design, endless bugs, and stingy loot drops. Deep down, however, he had always seen that entity as an unreachable higher power. He was merely a player trapped inside this world, forced to abide by pre-set rules. He had never dared imagine opposing the creator god. Yet now the divine power stat had appeared, tied directly to the unique legendary devouring void flame. He could not help but wonder. Strength, agility, constitution, all those were mortal realm attributes. Even maxed out, they only granted formidable physical bodies, enough to slay mutated beasts and clear rodent or insect swarms. Against truly transcendent beings, however, they would likely prove insufficient. After figuring out the intricacies of divine power, Hao Yun suddenly remembered the dungeon. He walked back to the entrance of the mountain temple and reached out to touch the lopsided blue light membrane. The system panel popped up with a swish. He stared at it and raised an eyebrow. At the very top of the panel was a line of text, remaining access attempts, 0. Below it, the difficulty options for normal, hard, and epic glowed faintly. Only the legendary difficulty entry had turned dull gray, coated as if in dust, and completely unclickable. A small line of notes sat beside it. Unique reward already claimed. Difficulty permanently locked. Alright, so it really is one time only. Hao Yun stroked his chin, understanding dawning on him. There's only one legendary reward. Whoever gets it first claims the prize, and then it's gone for good. Makes sense. A unique legendary treasure would be far too overpowered if it could be farmed endlessly. He had clung to a sliver of hope that he could exploit a glitch to loot the legendary treasure chest once a day. But that hope was now dashed. For all the creator god's apparent carelessness, strict limits were placed on exclusive core rewards. Unwilling to accept it, he sidled over and squeezed through the crack he had used before. He slipped easily into the dungeon and looked up. The empty underground palace remained unchanged. Stone pillars, stone steps, a stone throne, and the treasure chest. Yet the moment Hao Yun moved to open the chest, a system notification appeared. You have 0 remaining claimable rewards. Hao Yun sighed. Great, it's completely useless now. He circled the great hall twice, checking every nook and cranny, but found nothing at all. I can get inside. Sure, but there are no rewards and no monsters. What's the point of coming in? Sightseeing in a stone building? I can't even grind experience here. It's a total waste of time. Put plainly, this unfinished dungeon was nothing more than an empty scene shell. All core content was missing, and its single treasure chest had already been emptied thanks to his glitch. As far as he was concerned, the Mountain Temple dungeon held no more value. There was no reason to return in the future. Still, once the god finished spawning wild monsters inside the dungeon, Hao Yun would be able to sneak in to farm experience. Experience gained within the dungeon ought to be better than picking off low-value mosquitoes. He did not linger any longer. He squeezed back out through the crack and brushed stone dust off his clothes. No more opportunities with the dungeon. That works. I can focus on testing the true combat potential of this strange flame and figure out how to level it up. Hao Yun called Chongping Jun and headed deeper into the wooded hills along the mountain path. He kept replaying the line from the skill description in his mind. It can raise its level by absorbing energy from all creation, enemy attacks, and other fire sources. The flame was only level 1 right now. If its rank rose, its power would be extraordinary. Perhaps one day it would burn mountains and seas, overcoming any divine being that stood in its way. He had not walked far when he spotted a flock of roughly a dozen mutated mountain pheasants pecking for insects in the underbrush. Their levels hovered around 6 or 7. You'll make perfect test subjects. Hao Yun neither drew his blade nor nocked an arrow. With a thought, the devouring void flame emerged, swirling around his fingertips. He did not unleash it all at once. Instead, he split off dozens of wisp, thin strands of black fire, and flicked his fingers. The fire threads drifted slowly toward the flock. Silent and unnoticeable, the fire threads touched the pheasants. The lively birds did not even manage a single flutter. They froze on the spot, shrinking and dissolving visibly. In less than 20 seconds, all the large pheasants vanished without a trace. Not a single feather remained on the ground. Ding! Mutated mountain pheasant slain. Experience plus 50, a string of notifications chimed one after another. Experience arrived as normal, without deduction. Ignoring the experience gain, Hao Yun turned his focus inward to his dantian to carefully observe the devouring void flame. He could clearly sense the fire source growing slightly denser. The change was faint, almost imperceptible, yet it had undeniably grown stronger. So absorbing energy from slain monsters levels it up. He nodded in confirmation. Progress is just slow. A dozen small pheasants are barely enough to whet its appetite. The growth gained is so minimal you'd miss it if you weren't paying close attention. At this rate, he would need to incinerate hundreds, even thousands of ordinary wild monsters just to reach level 2. It was no different from how players grinded experience, an extremely slow process. He continued walking deeper into the mountains, turning ideas over in his head. From what the skill description stated, there were 3 ways to upgrade the flame. The first method was what he was doing now, hunting monsters and absorbing their spiritual energy. The upside was reliability. As long as monsters existed to burn, he could accumulate power bit by bit. The downside was speed. Low, rank creatures provided negligible energy, requiring massive numbers and a great deal of time and effort. The second method was absorbing incoming enemy attacks. At this thought, Hao Yun's eyes lit up. This ability was incredibly powerful. Could the flame absorb any energy, charged strike, whether claws, fangs, or elemental attacks from supernatural beasts he might face later? It would act as both defense and a source of growth for the flame, merging offense and defense into one. When I face powerful bosses later, maybe I can let them attack me repeatedly, feeding all their strikes straight to the flame? Hao Yun let out a quiet laugh. If that works, it would be ridiculously overpowered. Still, it was only speculation. Facing a high-rank boss, he could not guarantee the flame could withstand overwhelming blows. If an attack exceeded what the fire could absorb, he would be the one suffering the consequences. For safety, he decided to treat this function primarily as an emergency defensive measure. The third method was the one Hao Yun coveted most, consuming other fire sources. Simply put, he needed to seek out other flames and devour them to level up. It reminded him of the strange flame rankings in Xianxiao novels. Absorbing a single foreign flame would grant far greater progress than hunting monsters, hundreds or thousands of times more efficient. The question is whether other fire sources exist in this world. Hao Yun stroked his chin, lost in thought. The devouring void flame came from the Mountain Temple dungeon. Perhaps other dungeons and secret realms hold different flames, blazing lotus karmic fire, nether ghost fire, and the like. If I could consume them all, the devouring void flame would become unstoppable. The more he considered it, the more plausible it seemed. This world operated on a vast scale, and divine power was already a proven force. Multiple varieties of fire sources were hardly out of the question. Unfortunately, clues were scarce. Aside from the black flame in his possession, he had yet to catch sight of any other fire. This path would require continued exploration, more dungeons, and fortuitous encounters. There was no way to rush it. Hao Yun and Chongping Jun headed down the mountain with the hares they had caught that morning. As for the mountain pheasants they encountered earlier, all had been completely consumed by the devouring void flame. On the way back, Hao Yun gathered some wild vegetables, securing ingredients for dinner. When they returned to the old house, the sun hung low above the mountain ridges, painting the horizon vivid crimson. Hao Yun carried the wild vegetables and cleaned rabbit meat into the courtyard. Chongping Jun trotted familiarly over to the stove, its tail sweeping grass fragments across the ground, clearly waiting for the meal. Patience. I'll start cooking now. Chongping Jun had once been unable to eat cooked food, but its evolution after leveling up meant it could now share Hao Yun's meals. That said, most days Hao Yun simply tossed raw meat out of his storage bag for the tiger. Few people bothered cooking every single day. For the past 3 months, Hao Yun himself had survived on pre-packaged meals and canned food. He rolled up his sleeves, lit the fire, and set the pot on the stove. He chopped the rabbit meat into chunks and fried them, adding wild mushrooms and mountain vegetables he had collected, then poured in stream water to simmer. Soon, the pot bubbled steadily. The aroma of meat and vegetables filled the courtyard, far fresher than any vacuum-sealed pre-packaged food from the city. Man and tiger sat beside the stove, enjoying their meal heartily. Hao Yun ate rice with rabbit meat. The vegetables soaked in meat broth tasted so delicious he nearly bit his tongue. Mid-bite, he paused as a new thought occurred to him. Relying entirely on foraging from the mountains could not sustain him long-term. Rice was not a problem at all. When he scavenged supermarkets and grain depots in the city, he had stuffed countless sacks of rice, wheat flour, and noodles into his storage bag. Conservatively speaking, he had enough to feed himself for a full decade. What was more, the system storage preserved goods perfectly. Items remained unchanged no matter how long they stayed inside, safe from mold and pests for years. Fresh vegetables, however, were a different matter. No matter how many cans and dehydrated vegetables he stockpiled, they would eventually run out. Wild vegetables grew abundantly on the mountains, but they followed seasonal cycles. Once winter arrived, they would vanish entirely. If time remained frozen for another 10 years or longer, he could not survive forever on plain rice and dried meat. I need to start growing vegetables. Hao-Yin set down his chopsticks and made up his mind. They were ready, made planting beds within the courtyard and wide stretches of wasteland outside the village that he could cultivate at will. But land alone was not enough. He needed seeds. Any leftover seeds stored in the house would no longer be viable after such a long time. The thought of seeds made him frown. Time stood still across this world, yet materials still degraded naturally. Ordinary vegetable seeds lost most of their germination potential after 2 or 3 years, and were effectively useless after 5 or 6. If the freeze dragged on for a decade, there might be no viable seeds left once humanity awoke. Cultivation would become impossible. That would be a true disaster. I have to head into town. Hao-Yin grew increasingly convinced of the urgency. There was an agricultural seed station in town, alongside several seed shops stocked with vegetable seeds, grain seeds, and fruit saplings. He needed to collect everything while the seeds remained viable and store them in his storage bag. The harvest would sustain his own farm, and beyond that, it would preserve essential supplies for humanity's future. He resolved to act immediately. Early the next morning, he drove his heavy truck toward town. The village was not far from the town. Normally the drive took 20 minutes, but weeds overgrew the roads and potholes littered the route. It took nearly an hour to reach the town limits. The town was far more overgrown than the village. Shopfronts stood open along the streets. Countless people remained frozen in place. Shoppers, street vendors, tricycle riders, trapped in the poses they had held 3 months earlier. Hao-Yin paid them little mind and drove straight to the farmer's market on the western edge of town. The market gate stood wide open, the empty stalls covered in dust. He remembered the seed shop was just inside the entrance on the left, marked by a blue sign with white lettering. Li Min Seed Agricultural Supplies. He pushed the door open. A small bell jingled, the sound sharp in the quiet building. The shop was compact, roughly 20 square meters. Shelves lined all 3 walls, crammed full of goods. Without hesitation, he grabbed an empty woven sack and began clearing stock, working his way along every shelf. The shelves closest to the entrance held leafy vegetable seeds in great variety. Chinese cabbage, baby bok choy, Shanghai green, lettuce, leaf lettuce, spinach, celery, chives, coriander, garland chrysanthemum, water spinach, Malabar spinach. Bags of all sizes were stacked neatly, including bulk supplies and small package varieties, even multiple fast-growing strains suitable for year-round sowing. Further inside were root vegetables and solanaceous crops: radish, carrot, white radish, watermelon radish, potato, sweet potato, Chinese yam, taro, tomato, eggplant, chili, green pepper, bell pepper, cucumber, winter melon, pumpkin, loofah, bitter melon, zucchini. There were countless chili varieties: bird's eye chili, thread pepper, sweet pepper, millet pepper, plus mustard greens used for pickling. The rear section stocked melons, beans, and coarse grains: soybean, mung bean, red bean, black bean, pea, broad bean, peanut, sesame, watermelon, muskmelon, honeydew melon. He even found packs of strawberry seeds and grape saplings. Large sacks of corn, wheat, and sorghum seed leaned against the walls, originally sold to large-scale grain farmers, now all for Hao-Yin to claim. The small back storeroom held even more supplies. Beyond vegetable seeds, stacked crates contained fruit saplings: apple, pear, peach, plum, cherry, walnut, chestnut. Each sapling's root ball was wrapped in soil and sealed with plastic film. Beside them were bags of chemical fertilizer, compound fertilizer, organic manure, insecticides, herbicides. Alongside plastic mulch, bamboo stakes, and grafting tools arranged neatly. Hao-Yin took everything he could. He cleared entire boxes of small seed packets, loaded whole sacks of grain seed into his storage bag, carefully stowed away the fruit saplings, and did not leave behind fertilizer or pesticides. His storage bag had limitless space and preserved everything perfectly. Seeds stored inside would remain viable for decades. As he worked, he could not help but reflect. People always overlook these things. Seed packets cost just a few coins, and no one pays them much attention. But now, they are priceless. If time stayed frozen for 20 years, grain and vegetable seeds would become the foundation for rebuilding civilization once humanity woke up. He spent more than an hour clearing out every usable item in the seed shop and its warehouse. He even tucked the planting manuals and pest prevention books hanging on the wall into his storage bag. After leaving the seed shop, he visited the 2 neighboring agricultural supply and farm tool stores. He collected multiple sets of hoes, sickles, shovels, and pickaxes along with irrigation hoses, sprayers, carrying poles, and bamboo baskets. He even stored the 2 mini-tillers parked outside the shop entrance. These tools will be essential for clearing wasteland and farming later. By the time he drove back to the old house, it was already late afternoon. Chomping June waited at the courtyard gate. It trotted over and rubbed against the truck door as soon as it spotted him. "Don't get excited. You'll have plenty to witness soon." Hao-Yun jumped down and gestured toward the wasteland beyond the courtyard. "We start clearing the land tomorrow. We'll cultivate the garden beds and open up those several mu of farmland outside. We'll grow grain and vegetables. This place will be our permanent home." Dawn broke early the next day. Hao-Yun slung a hoe over his shoulder and set out, officially beginning his land reclamation project. He started with the 2 rows of old planting beds inside the courtyard. Left untended for 3 months, they were overgrown with deeply rooted weeds. He swung the hoe repeatedly, pulling out roots and stones, breaking up clods of earth to form smooth, even seed beds. The family's private farmland outside the courtyard had lain abandoned for nearly a year. Weeds grew taller than a person. First, he cut down the weeds, then turned over the soil, sweating profusely. Chomping June lay in the shade at the edge of the field, slowly swishing its tail like a foreman on watch. Occasionally, it chased passing butterflies, showing no interest in lending a hand. "You sure know how to take it easy." Hao-Yun straightened up and wiped sweat from his forehead, calling toward the tiger. "Don't sneak bites once the vegetables grow." Chomping June tilted its head, seemingly unable to understand, then laid back down to nap. By midday, he had cleared roughly half a mu of land and divided it into multiple plots. He saw no need to finish everything at once. He would plant a portion first to test growth. He retrieved seeds from his storage bag. Leafy greens such as cabbage, lettuce, and Shanghai green went into the courtyard beds for convenient watering and easy harvesting. The outer fields were reserved for longer, lasting crops: radishes, potatoes, pumpkins. He set aside a small plot for corn and soybeans to observe how they grew. As he rested, 2 crisp notification chimes echoed in his mind. Ding! Large-scale farming activity detected. Basic life occupation unlocked. Farmer beginner ding. Passive skill acquired. Basic cultivation beginner. Crop growth speed within your territory increased by 50%. Plant disease and pest resistance moderately improved. Huh, that's a pleasant surprise. Hao-Yun jumped to his feet and hurried over to the planting beds. In the short time he had rested, the newly sown seeds had already broken through the soil, pushing up neat rows of tender green sprouts. The growth rate far exceeded normal standards. "Wow, it really speeds things up," he nearly shouted in shock. 50% faster growth. Vegetables that normally take 30 days to mature can be harvested in 20. This was an enormous stroke of luck. He had expected a long wait before eating fresh home-grown vegetables, yet the growing cycle was nearly cut in half. The improved resistance to pests and disease was equally valuable. He would no longer spend endless hours picking caterpillars or risk losing entire harvests to insect outbreaks. So this world actually has proper life occupations? Hao-Yun stroked his chin, intrigued. Will there be blacksmith, chef, and alchemist occupations later? If I unlock all of them, this will feel like a simulation game. Back in the city, his days consisted solely of monster hunting, scavenging, and leveling up, monotonous and repetitive. Now that he had returned to the village, clearing land, growing crops, and keeping a tiger companion made life feel rich and fulfilling. He walked over to the outer farmland. The corn and soybean seeds had also sprouted, their pale yellow shoots pushing through soil husks. They were growing even more vigorously than the leafy greens in the courtyard. At this pace, he could expect his first harvest in less than 2 months. Excellent, truly excellent. Hao-Yun rubbed his hands together, delighted. With this skill, grain and vegetables will never be a worry. Once all this land is cultivated, I can plant wheat and rice. There will be enough food for myself, and surplus to share with other survivors if humanity awakens from the time freeze. Lost in thought, Chomping June trotted over and rubbed its large head against his leg. It lowered its nose to sniff the delicate sprouts in the planting beds. "Hey, don't touch those." Hao-Yun gently moved the tiger's head aside. "These are seedlings, not food. Once they mature, I'll cook pumpkin for you." Chomping June let out a soft whine and stepped back obediently, settling beside him. Yet peace did not last 3 days before trouble arrived. Early one morning, Hao-Yun got up and headed straight for the planting beds as usual to check how much the seedlings had grown. The moment he reached the courtyard gate, his scalp tingled with alarm. A dense dark cloud of birds, sparrows, turtle doves, and other unidentified wild birds hovered over the vegetable plots, pecking frantically at the young shoots. The tender seedlings that had only sprouted 2 days earlier were torn to shreds. Some seeds had been dug straight out of the soil and eaten completely. The half-moo of farmland outside fared even worse. The newly sprouted corn and soybean shoots were gnawed down to bare stalks, stripped of every green leaf. Damn it! Where did all these birds come from? Hao Yun shouted and rushed forward, waving his arms to scare them away. The flock rose into the air in a great swirl, circling overhead. The moment he turned his back, they descended again to continue feeding, completely undaunted by his presence. Ding! Wild sparrow slain. Experience plus 20 ding. Wild sparrow slain. Experience plus 20 ding. Wild sparrow slain. Experience plus 20. Hao Yun possessed extremely high strength. Enemies were nearly killed on contact, yet there was one major problem: the sheer number of these birds. Wave after wave descended on him, seemingly endless. All of this stemmed from the ecological restructuring. The system had accelerated plant growth, and animals had not been left out either. This was especially true for these fast-breeding birds. Normally, they laid a clutch every half-month, but empowered by spiritual energy, their reproduction rate had surged more than fivefold. Broods hatched one after another, and their population exploded exponentially. Wild grains and grass seeds in the fields could no longer sustain them, so they had set their sights on his vegetable garden. Damn it! So the farmer's skill was unlocked for nothing. Hao Yun squatted on the threshold, scratching his head in frustration. No matter how fast the crops grow, they can't keep up with all these hungry birds. The seedlings get gnawed to the ground as soon as they sprout. No amount of planting can satisfy them. He could not stand guard over the fields every single day to chase birds away. He still needed to venture into the mountains to hunt monsters and upgrade his flame seed. He simply did not have the spare time. He brooded for a long while, then caught sight of Chongping Jun chasing butterflies nearby. A sudden idea popped into his head. Wait a minute, the king of beasts was right here. How dared these little birds keep coming? He glanced at Chongping Jun, then sensed the devouring void flame residing in his dantian, and a complete plan formed in his mind. None of these birds were high level, topping out at level 2 or 3. Chongping Jun was already level 18, a complete mismatch in levels. The aura of the king of beasts alone would send ordinary beasts fleeing long before they drew near. As for the devouring void flame, even Chongping Jun instinctively feared it. These skittish birds would run at just a whiff of its presence. Focusing his mind, he summoned a wisp of faint devouring void flame and let it drift slowly above the vegetable plots. Instantly, the sparrows circling above the courtyard sensed something terrifying. They squawked as if they had spotted an eagle and fled for the distance without daring to look back. 2 minutes later, not a single bird could be seen anywhere around the courtyard. It works. Hao Yun slapped his thigh, overjoyed. The inner courtyard was taken care of. The outer fields would be even simpler. He patted Chongping Jun's large head and pointed toward the vegetable plots outside the yard, assigning the tiger the task of guarding the land and scaring birds away with roars if any approached. Chongping Jun was reluctant, but he could not disobey someone far stronger than himself. He strode over to a mound beside the fields and lay down. Before long, another massive flock of birds swooped in, ready to land among the crops. Chongping Jun lifted his eyelids, rumbled deep in his chest, and let out a low tiger roar. Roar! The flock panicked instantly, darting about wildly like headless flies. A few of the timid ones lost control mid-flight and tumbled to the ground, their legs trembling too much to take off again. Chongping Jun stretched out a paw, picked them up, and crunched them down as snacks. And just like that, the inner courtyard protected by the oppressive aura of the strange flame and the outer fields guarded by the tiger solved his troublesome bird infestation completely. For the next 2 days, not a single bird dared to land near the crops. None would venture within 10 meters of the vegetable plots. Freed from destruction and boosted by his cultivation skill, the seedlings shot upward visibly, changing by the hour, nearly ready for thinning. Hao Yun finally breathed easy. Every day, he hunted monsters in the mountains to temper his flame, then returned to water his plants and pet the tiger. Life could not have been more pleasant. One afternoon, he carried a bucket to fetch water from the stream and casually glanced across the distant ridges. His footsteps ground to an abrupt halt. Standing in the middle of the abandoned rice paddies outside the village was a shiny silver metal cabinet, square, shaped, printed with beverage artwork. It was unmistakably a vending machine. A vending machine appearing out of nowhere in remote rice fields? Hao Yun frowned, filled with suspicion. This spot was neither too close nor too far from the village. There had been nothing here a few days earlier. How had it suddenly appeared? No villager could have carried it here after time resumed. Thinking back to the unfinished dungeon at the Mountain God Temple, His heart skipped a beat. No way. Was this God, who functioned like a game developer, rolling out another new feature? Hao-Yin did not dare approach directly. He circled half the rice paddy to check for hidden monsters and traps before slowly drawing near. The vending machine stood rigidly on the ridge, surrounded by waste, high weeds with no path leading toward it. It could not possibly have been moved here by anyone in the past. Its body was the standard silver gray. Dew dotted the glass door, which glowed with faint pale white light. It looked identical to machines found on city streets, yet placed in this desolate wilderness, it exuded an uncanny atmosphere. A wild vending machine? Did the system really spawn this? Hao-Yin muttered, leaning close to the glass to peer inside. The selection within was surprisingly varied. 5 shelves were crammed full, mixing ordinary goods with bizarre items, typical of an unfinished system. The top 2 shelves held the most familiar products, common snacks and drinks. Bottled cola, chilled mineral water, iced black tea, nutrient milk drinks, bread, ham sausages, marinated eggs, chocolate, even packaged instant noodles. Brands varied wildly. Some labels were printed crookedly, some packaging crumpled, as if they had been tossed in haphazardly to fill space. The 3rd and 4th shelves grew stranger, stocked entirely with practical supplies. On the left were small packets of vegetable seeds marked high-yield cabbage seeds and fast-growing lettuce seeds, with neater packaging than the seeds he had acquired in town. Beside them sat small bottles of insect repellent, foliar fertilizer, and bags of organic fertilizer, all useful for farming. The right side held survival supplies, hemostatic bandages, iodized cotton pads, bottles of saline solution, plus several tubes of ointment labeled basic healing salve. The 5th, middle shelf, contained genuine game items. 3 small red vials marked basic stamina potion, alongside 2 gray pellets named Trace Experience Pill. In the corner rested 2 bags of dried meat labeled low-tier pet rations. All were common white-tier goods. Unexpectedly, among these white-tier items lay a purple-tier object. There was also a normal dungeon reset ticket. Hao-Yin opened the item descriptions to read them. Basic stamina potion white, common low-tier consumable. Gradually restores a small amount of stamina over 10 seconds after consumption. Trace Experience Pill white, grants a small amount of experience upon ingestion. Low-tier pet rations white, grants a small amount of experience to pets. Normal dungeon reset ticket purple, resets the available entry count for the normal difficulty of a completed dungeon once. Amazing loot. Hao-Yin grew excited at once. Even though it only applied to normal difficulty, the rewards would surely be worthwhile. He had obtained the Devouring Void Flame from the Mountain God Temple's legendary difficulty. Even if normal difficulty only granted something modest like a defensive shield, Hao-Yin would be satisfied. But how do I buy things? He glanced instinctively toward the payment slot, finding neither scanning codes nor coin slots. What's this? Not even a payment QR code. Hao-Yin tapped the panel. Hey, you can't refuse cash payment. That's against regulations. As soon as he spoke, pale blue system text flashed across the screen. Accepted currency, spirit crystals, banknotes, metal coins, and item bartering are not supported. Regulations, my ass. Hao-Yin's mouth twitched. He quickly reminded himself that this was a world reshaped by spiritual energy overrun with dungeons. Old human laws no longer held sway. His comment had merely been an automatic reflex. He immediately pulled up his status panel and scanned his stats. Strength, 112 Constitution, 198 Agility, 137 Intelligence, 76 Spirit, 89 Luck, 15 Divine Power, 20 Spirit Crystals held. 0 The number stood stark and solitary. 0. So Spirit Crystals act as an independent currency. Hao-Yin knitted his brows in confusion. Logically speaking, there are 2 main ways to obtain them, slaying spirit beasts, or mining ore and refining crystals. The logic made sense, yet a clear problem emerged. Ever since time had frozen across the world, he had hunted countless monsters. Thousands upon thousands of creatures had died by his hands, converted into experience points. Not once had he seen a single complete spirit crystal, not even a fragment. Monster drops had never materialized at all. Obviously, this god operating like a game developer had not finished implementing the basic loot drop system. What an unreliable setup. Hao-Yin planted his hands on his hips and rolled his eyes at the vending machine. You haven't finished the drop system, so no one can farm spirit crystals. What am I supposed to pay with? Thin air? Did you spawn this machine just to be a useless decoration? Despite his complaints, he leaned closer and studied the price tags behind the glass, growing increasingly tempted. The shelves were fully stocked. The cheapest item, bottled mineral water, cost zero point 0.5 spirit crystals. A basic stamina potion was priced at 3 crystals, and a trace experience pill required 10. Tucked at the bottom lay the glowing purple normal dungeon reset ticket, marked at a staggering 1,000 spirit crystals. Whoa, the dungeon reset ticket. Hao Yun's eyes widened. If he got his hands on this, he could revisit the unfinished Mountain God Temple dungeon whenever he wanted. Even if monsters and rewards were missing right now, once the system updated and added them, the ticket would let him run it repeatedly. It was undeniably expensive. At 1,000 spirit crystals, gathering enough would demand hunting countless elite monsters under normal circumstances. He stared at the glowing purchase button, his fingers itching. He could not afford anything anyway. What harm would there be in tapping it? Acting purely on impulse, his finger pressed the purchase button. He braced himself for a notification of insufficient balance, but a soft click echoed. The dispenser chute at the bottom of the machine slid open, and an object fell out. A thin slip of paper shimmering with faint purple light lay quietly inside. Hao Yun. He froze for 3 seconds before picking up the ticket. It felt cool to the touch, covered in intricate patterns. It was genuine, not a dummy item. What is going on? He stared at the ticket from every angle, dumbfounded. I have 0 spirit crystals. Why did the purchase go through? What did it deduct? My luck stat. He frantically reopened his status panel, focusing on the spirit crystal counter. The text read clearly, spirit crystals held, 1,000. No way. It works like this? Hao Yun nearly shouted, staring at the minus sign in shock and delight. He already knew luck could drop into negative values, but he never imagined spirit crystal balances could go negative too. Realization dawned instantly. I get it. He stroked his chin, marveling. The drop system exists on paper, but generates no crystals. The currency system is finished, without any checks to block purchases when funds run low. 2 bugs overlapping, creating an unexpected loophole. Since crystals cannot be earned, the system simply allows overdrafting, free shopping. Just as expected, a game built on messy, unfinished code is full of glitches. He was all too familiar with this scenario. In the past, he had tested many shoddily made indie games lacking numerical boundary checks. Players could spend money until their balance went negative and still buy items, effectively gaining an unlimited currency exploit. Older Famicom games also featured classic overflow bugs, where subtracting 1 from 0 would flip the value to the maximum possible number. He never imagined encountering the same glitch in the real world. There was no reason to hold back. Hao Yun's eyes lit up. He rubbed his hands together and began tapping purchase repeatedly without hesitation. Basic stamina potions? Buy them. Trace experience pills? Buy them. High yield vegetable seeds, pet rations, healing salve, basic antidotes. Every purchasable item was ordered. He did not even skip the cola, mineral water, bread, and sausages. Everything vanished into his storage bag. He grabbed every item regardless of immediate usefulness. After all, it was all bought on credit via a bug. There was no requirement to repay. More than 10 minutes later, every shelf inside the vending machine stood empty. His spirit crystal count plummeted from 1,000 to a seemingly endless negative number with far too many digits to read. At that moment, pale blue text appeared on the machine screen. All daily stock sold out. Inventory will restock randomly at 4 a.m. tomorrow. They even set a proper refresh time. Hao Yun raised an eyebrow. Anyone who played online games knew 4 a.m. was the window with the lowest player activity. Daily resets, server maintenance, and data refreshes were usually scheduled then, limiting the impact if glitches appeared. It seemed this god was sloppy at game development, yet understood basic server operations. Unfortunately for them, payment validation was completely broken. The first day after spawning the machine, every product had been looted through the bug. Got it, 4 a.m. sharp. Hao Yun stuffed his last bottle of cola into his storage bag, satisfied. I'll be here right on time tomorrow. He checked his system storage. Key supplies filled the slots neatly. Normal dungeon reset ticket times 10 trace experience pill times 100 low. Tier pet rations times 100 basic stamina potion times 100. He had not stopped voluntarily. The machine simply had no more stock. Every item had a fixed daily restock limit. Once sold out, the icons grayed out, and no amount of tapping would produce more goods. As he walked home, a bold thought crossed his mind. If a machine could spawn out of nowhere in remote rice paddies, could there be more vending machines scattered across the village and town? It seemed unlikely this was the only unit on the entire map. Moreover, different machines might stock different merchandise. This one focused on potions, seeds, and basic supplies. Perhaps others sold equipment blueprints, skill books, or flame seed materials. The more he thought about it, the more plausible it felt. In standard online games, shops and vending machines at different locations carried specialized inventories. No matter how careless this god was, he would not place just one machine across such a vast region. There was no time to waste. His vegetable patch was trivial. Even if birds destroyed the crops, he could always replant later. Farming would also help level up his farmer class. To ignore such an easily exploitable bug would be a disgrace to someone who once worked as a game tester. Chomping June, let's go. We're not heading home. We're searching the mountains for more machines. Hao Yun waved and turned toward the eastern edge of the village. Chomping June clamped a bag of newly received pet rations in his jaws, paused briefly, then trotted after him. Following his master meant food, so he did not care where they traveled. The pair traveled along abandoned highways toward the town entrance for most of the day, covering hundreds of kilometers. Eventually, they found another machine. Beneath the eaves of a derelict roadside gas station stood a second silver, gray vending machine. It really exists. Hao Yun brightened, rushing forward. His finger reached the touchscreen, yet the screen lit up and left him stunned. Every shelf was bare. All product icons were grayed out. Not even a bottle of mineral water remained. Damn, it's empty. He refused to accept it and tapped every icon. Every attempt returned a stock shortage notice, identical to the state of the first machine once emptied. Hao Yun stroked his chin and quickly deduced the truth. So all vending machines share the same data? Global shared inventory. This discovery exceeded his expectations. He had assumed each machine held independent stock, meaning finding 10 units would let him loot 10 times more goods. Instead, all machines pulled from a unified warehouse. His mind raced with questions. Was the inventory shared town-wide, province-wide, or across the whole planet? If limited to this region, it was manageable. If truly global, traveling overseas to find other machines would yield nothing but empty shelves. Still, these were merely theories. He had not fully explored the area around the county, so testing such a hypothesis was impossible. Though shared inventory meant he could not double his loot, Hao Yun refused to feel discouraged. Another devious plan formed. If he could not buy extra supplies, he could move the machines home. Traveling several kilometers each day to restock was inconvenient. If he moved the machines into his courtyard, he could buy new goods the second inventory refreshed at 4 a.m. without leaving his house. He resolved to act immediately. He circled the second machine and examined its exterior. No power cables, no anchor bolts, no connecting pipes of any kind. It simply rested on the ground, conjured from nothing. Makes sense. Creations of a god do not need mains electricity. He knelt down, gripped the base of the cabinet, and lifted with his arms. With 112 points of strength, he could lift hundreds of kilograms effortlessly. The machine looked heavy but weighed far less than anticipated. He hoisted it off the ground and held it steady. It actually moves? Hao Yun chuckled. This god has basic ideas, yet lacks foresight. Has he never considered someone could haul every vending machine on the map away and hoard them? And that was exactly what he intended to do. Without further delay, he slung the vending machine over his shoulder and headed back. First, he detoured to the rice paddy to collect the first machine as well. Neither unit was overly burdensome. Carrying one on each shoulder posed little strain for him. He transported both vending machines all the way back to his courtyard. Once inside, he positioned one against the wall facing the main hall, visible as soon as he stepped outside each morning. He tried to stow the second machine inside his system storage bag, yet the interface showed no response. Clearly, physical objects spawned by the system could not be stored within spatial inventory. What a shame. Hao Yun sighed. If they fit in storage, I could bring one anywhere I go. It was not a major setback. He could simply carry one on journeys. It might be cumbersome, yet it guaranteed steady access to the exploitable stock each day. Glancing at the 10 normal dungeon reset tickets inside his storage bag, Hao Yun skipped farming and mountain monster hunting the next morning and headed straight for the mountain god temple in the hills. Now that he held the tickets, he needed to test their function. His previous dungeon entry attempts had been blocked, with normal difficulty unlocked yet inaccessible. The reset ticket would let him discover what rewards awaited in the unfinished dungeon's easiest mode. Reaching the temple entrance, he placed his palm against the warped blue light barrier. The system panel popped up. Normal difficulty displayed. Available entries, 0, with a small reset button beside it. It works. He tapped the button. A prompt appeared. Available entries exhausted. Consume 1 times normal dungeon reset ticket to reset. Reset. The panel shimmered. A notification chimed. Ding. Consumed 1 times normal dungeon reset ticket. Normal difficulty of Mountain God Temple Dungeon reset. Remaining entries, 1. Hao Yun did not hesitate. He selected normal difficulty and stepped through the light barrier. his vision blurred. He stood within the familiar underground palace, stone pillars, steps, and throne unchanged. Identical to the scene he had witnessed earlier after exploiting a glitch to pass through the walls. He didn't spot a single puppet soldier or monster as he'd expected. The great hall was utterly empty, not a creature in sight. He was just about to complain when a notification suddenly echoed inside his head. The system prompt popped up immediately. Ding. Player has entered the core zone of the dungeon. Clearance for normal difficulty confirmed. Damn, so just walking in counts as clearing it. Hao Yun let out an exasperated laugh. This deity sure loves cutting corners. They skipped all the combat sequences entirely, huh? It was the same old glitch. The dungeon logic only registered reaching the throne room as a successful clear, with no requirement to defeat any monsters. He hadn't even drawn his blade. Simply standing there was enough to complete the run. A wooden chest glowing with faint pale blue light slowly materialized in front of the stone throne. Its tier was higher than the dull gray common chests, yet nowhere near the dazzling golden radiance of chests from legendary difficulty. Hao Yun stepped forward and lifted the lid. A string of system alerts immediately appeared. Ding. Open normal difficulty clearance chest. Obtained. Skill book. Intermediate mastery of cultivation blue rare ×1. Obtained. Low-grade primordial flame nourishing elixir blue rare ×1. Primary healing pill white ×2. Obtained. Whole wheat bread ×5. Whoa, a skill book dropped. Hao Yun was caught off guard. He hadn't expected a normal dungeon run to reward 2 blue tier items. He picked up the skill book first. The cover of Intermediate Mastery of Cultivation shimmered pale blue. Flipping it open revealed complete cultivation guidelines recorded by the system. Notes: upon learning this skill, the farmer occupation advances to intermediate. Crop growth speed receives an additional 30% boost. Unlocks 2 passive abilities, crop crossbreeding and compost acceleration. The effective range of territorial cultivation bonuses is also expanded. Perfect timing. Hao Yun grinned from ear to ear. He had only unlocked the basic farmer occupation a few days prior and was wishing for better growth bonuses. Now he directly obtained the advancement book. With the intermediate cultivation buff stacked alongside the plot's inherent growth boost, leafy vegetables could be ready for harvest in just over 10 days. Grain yields would rise substantially as well. Hao Yun pressed his fingertip against the book's cover and focused his thoughts. The system prompt appeared right away. Learn Intermediate Mastery of Cultivation? Learn. Pale blue light particles drifted off the pages and flowed into his forehead. Instantly, comprehensive knowledge covering crop breeding, straw composting, and field water and fertilizer management flooded his mind, as if he had tended farmland for decades. Ding. Farmer occupation promoted to intermediate. Ding. Total crop growth speed bonus increased to 80% basic 50% plus intermediate 30%. Unlocked passive, crop crossbreeding. Crossbreed plants of the same family. Chance to produce new varieties with higher yields and improved resistance to harsh conditions. Unlocked passive, compost acceleration. Organic fertilizer decomposition speed increased by 100%. Fertilizer efficiency boosted by 40%. Territorial cultivation effective range expanded to a 500-meter radius. Hao Yun closed his eyes and sensed the change. When he looked toward his vegetable plots down the hill, he felt a faint subtle connection, as if he could vaguely perceive the growth status of every seedling. Not bad at all. This haul was absolutely worth it. Trading 1 normal dungeon reset scroll for a blue tier skill book is a great deal. The basic bonus was already powerful, and now it stacked up to 80%. Leafy greens that once took a full month to mature could now be harvested in little more than 10 days. Compost acceleration was equally practical. Weeds, straw, and beast manure no longer needed months to ferment. They would turn into high-quality organic fertilizer in roughly 10 days. As for the low-grade primordial flame nourishing elixir blue rare, its purpose was straightforward, consumables to fuel the growth of exotic flames. Hao Yun held the vials in his palm and focused. The dormant devouring void flame within his dantian stirred awake at once. A wisp of deep black flame drifted out of his dantian and hovered above his hand. Chongping Jun, who was resting nearby, instinctively ducked his head and shuffled backward. Even accustomed to this aura, primitive dread lingered within him. Time for your meal. Hao Yun smiled, twisted open the stoppers, and poured all the clear, deep red liquid into the air. The black flame surged violently. Its thin, wispy tongue solidified and thickened, with faint streaks of violet emerging deep within the firelight. Pure, nourishing energy merged into the flame's origin, steadily filling the requirements for the devouring void flame to grow. Ding. Devouring Void Flame absorbed low, grade Primordial Flame nourishing elixir. Growth increased significantly. Flame stability improved. Mental energy consumption slightly reduced. Hao Yun could clearly feel his command over the exotic flame growing stronger. Sustaining large-scale flames once drained massive amounts of mental energy, yet the burden felt far lighter now. The occasional instability and restlessness of the flame were completely gone. The exotic fire burned steady and docile. He quietly sensed the change and nodded in satisfaction. These specialized growth items were far more efficient than feeding the flame exotic beast carcasses. Keep growing. Once I run more dungeons, there will be plenty of resources for you. Hao Yun waved gently over the dancing black fire. On his command, the devouring void flame retreated obediently back into his dantian. The primary healing pill white and whole wheat bread were hardly valuable by comparison. Hao Yun stored the healing pills in his backpack and tossed the bread to Chongping Jun to free up inventory space. Having finished learning the skill, he turned his attention to the 9 remaining reset scrolls. There were no monsters inside the dungeon. Simply walking to the throne completed the clear. Each run took mere dozens of seconds, offering maximum efficiency. It would be a waste not to use every last scroll to exploit this flawed dungeon mechanic. Chongping Jun squatted on the stone steps, watching his master repeatedly enter and exit the dungeon as if visiting a neighbor. He yawned and crunched on the whole wheat bread dropped by the system. He did not need to fight. He only had to tag along and enjoy free supplies. Hao Yun wasted no time and began grinding with the remaining 9 scrolls. Enter the dungeon, stroll to the stone throne, open the chest, exit, activate reset. Every movement was fluid and practiced, as familiar as retrieving supplies from his own backyard storage. After 10 dungeon runs, every chest guaranteed at least 1 blue rare reward, with a diverse selection of loot. Hao Yun had not expected the normal difficulty reward pool of this unfinished dungeon to be so rich. On the second run, the chest yielded basic ore identification. He tapped the book. Blue light flooded into his forehead, embedding knowledge of hundreds of ores, their appearance, texture, quality grading, and patterns of vein distribution directly into his mind. Hao Yun glanced subconsciously at scattered rubble piled in the hall corner and instantly identified the stone type. Nice. No more blind searching when I explore mine tunnels. He weighed the skill book in his hand. While seemingly unremarkable, it would at least double his efficiency when hunting spirit crystals and forging materials later on. So far, however, he had not discovered any major differences between the ores of this world and those from before time froze. He had explored 2 abandoned mine tunnels near the villages before, finding only ordinary iron ore, granite, and quartz. The rocks were marginally harder due to ambient spirit energy, but fundamentally identical to minerals from Earth. Spirit crystal veins, dark iron, or elemental ores. He had never seen or even heard of such things. It stood to reason. The deity had not even finished basic monster loot mechanics. The ore system was probably still on the development list. Perhaps one day, the creator would remember and populate the map with new ore varieties in bulk. Hao Yun shrugged, unconcerned. He could not rely on salvaged steel pipes to craft all high-tier equipment forever. That would ruin the aesthetic of this spirit energy apocalypse. Learning the skill first carried no downsides. If the deity ever updated the mineral system, other survivors would puzzle over unfamiliar rocks while he could pinpoint mining locations instantly, seizing a critical advantage. The third run rewarded a basic primary spirit gathering formation blueprint. It could be activated using low-grade spirit crystals to mildly raise spirit energy concentration within its bounds. He could lay it beneath crop fields to boost harvests, place it in the courtyard to aid cultivation, or use it to nourish his exotic flame. I knew it. The deity must have created the formation master occupation. Hao Yun's eyes lit up. He pressed his fingertip to the blueprint, ready to absorb it just as he had with skill books. Yet the expected infusion of blue light never came. A cold system notification appeared instead. Prerequisite occupation missing. Primary formation master. Unable to learn or deploy this formation blueprint. Hao Yun. He paused for a moment before realizing the situation. Up to this point, the only life occupation he had unlocked was farmer, triggered by clearing and planting farmland. Occupations such as alchemist, forge master, and formation master had no accessible advancement paths. He had never seen occupation questlines or promotion items for any of them. Presumably, the deity had only created occupation names and blueprint templates. The complete advancement system remained unfinished. Typical half-finished content. Hao Yun grimaced, hardly surprised. If monster loot systems were incomplete, gaps within the occupation framework were to be expected. He could not reasonably expect a farmer to set up formations without formal training. That would render the formation master occupation meaningless. He carefully folded the blueprint and stored it deep inside his backpack. It was wise to hold on to valuable materials. Sooner or later, he would either find a formation master promotion tome, or the deity would update the occupation system. The blueprint would see use eventually. The fourth run dropped 2 intermediate primordial flame nourishing elixirs. Superior to the low-grade version from his first clear, their essence was purer, and the vials glowed faint crimson. The bottles felt warm when he lifted them. He fed them straight to the devouring void flame. Yet advancing the exotic flame proved difficult. Even after absorbing multiple elixirs, its level remained stagnant at level 1. Truly worthy of a legendary tier treasure, its growth requirements were far steeper than ordinary items. The 5th run rewarded the primary brewing technique skill book. The text contained thorough knowledge. Methods for distilling high-proof grain liquor, crafting various fruit wines, plus ancient fermentation techniques for black vinegar, soy sauce, and broad bean paste. It even included a simple recipe for low-grade spirit wine. When fermented with spirit-infused grain, the resulting liquor carried faint spirit energy. Regular consumption would slightly improve spirit energy absorption rates. Perfect. I can brew my own drinks later. Hao Yin grew excited. He intended to learn the skill immediately and test brewing liquor with newly acquired grain seeds. The moment his fingertip touched the pages, the system alert appeared. Prerequisite life occupation missing, primary brewer. Unable to learn this skill book, Hao Yin froze, then let out a helpless chuckle. Another incomplete system feature. He did not dwell on it. He stowed the skill book deep in his backpack alongside the spirit gathering formation blueprint. The 6th run yielded a package of spirit-infused miscellaneous grain seeds. Inside were 4 improved varieties: sorghum, millet, buckwheat, and oats. They thrived in poor soil, produced high yields, and the harvested grain contained faint spirit energy. They could be planted on thin hillside land outside the village without occupying prime farmland. The grain could serve as brewing ingredients, staple food, or animal feed. The accompanying 10 sacks of organic spirit fertilizer were equally useful. Combined with intermediate cultivation mastery, the first harvest would be abundant. The 7th run dropped basic trap mastery and 10 heavy-duty beast traps. After learning the skill, he could craft 3 categories of traps: lethal restraints, containment devices, and early warning triggers. They served both hunting and home defense. He could set ambushes against swarms of monsters when venturing into the mountains, and line the courtyard perimeter to sleep more securely at night, safe from nocturnal beast incursions. Once again, Hao Yin could not learn basic trap mastery. The system instructed him to first advance to the hunter occupation. The 8th run rewarded a blueprint for a compact spirit, energy water pump, and a full set of water conduits. Powered by low-grade spirit crystals, it could draw water from streams to irrigate dozens of farm plots effortlessly. As with the others, direct learning was blocked. He needed to become an artificer first. The 9th run produced a spirit calming powder recipe alongside 3 sets of refining auxiliary materials. Spirit calming powder restored twice as much mental energy as primary spirit recovery pills, without the subsequent exhaustion side effect. Unfortunately, he needed to unlock the alchemist occupation to craft it. The 10th and final scroll rewarded a primary territory marker flag. Ding. Detected immediately usable item. Primary territory marker flag upon placement designates a 50-meter radius as private territory. Activates basic territory buffs. Unauthorized entities cannot force entry. Finally, something that doesn't require occupation advancement. Hao Yin brightened and picked up the flag to examine it thoroughly. No occupation prerequisites, no barriers. Simply plant it into the ground to activate. His excitement faded quickly. The item was undeniably valuable for protection and privacy, and extremely sought after commodity if other players existed. But the world was trapped in time freeze. Aside from him, no living person could move. Who exactly was he defending against? He could hardly guard against pedestrians frozen mid-motion on the roads. They could not shift an inch. As for exotic beasts, the unauthorized entity restriction likely only applied to players. Monsters would still wander and unimpeded. In short, only the basic territory buff held practical value, stacking with his cultivation bonuses. All defensive functions were effectively useless for now. Better than nothing. Hao Yin shook his head and stored the flag. Carrying all the loot from 10 dungeon runs, Hao Yin led Chongping Jun slowly back to his courtyard. Instead of sorting his spoils right away, He pulled the primary territory marker flag out of his backpack. The flag was palm-sized, its pole carved from unknown dark timber. The cloth shimmered pale blue and felt smooth and solid to the touch. He crossed the uneven mud yard and stopped 3 steps from the main hall door, a spot that did not block walkways and sat close to both the house and vegetable plots. It covered the core zone perfectly. This spot will do. He pushed the flag into the soil. Once the tip sank half a foot, the flag anchored itself firmly. The banner unfurled without wind. An almost invisible ripple of pale blue light spread outward from the flagpole, sweeping across the entire courtyard, passing over the outer wall and stopping at the edge of the vegetable plots. At the same time, the full system description appeared on his panel. Item name, primary territory marker flag. Item tier, blue rare territory range, 50-meter radius. Range can be expanded by upgrading the flag or raising Lord Authority. Basic territory buffs, spirit energy moisture, spirit energy concentration within territory increased by 5%. Cultivation and exotic flame nourishing efficiency rise accordingly. Fertile ground blessing, crop growth speed within territory plus 10%. Plant disease resistance and environmental adaptability improved. Slow vitality restoration, natural health and mental energy recovery rate for allied units within territory slightly increased. Authority functions, the Lord may assign up to 3 secondary authorized personnel, granting them free entry rights. Unauthorized player units cannot cross territory boundaries by force and will be repelled by an invisible barrier. Basic anomaly alert. Notification triggers if player intruders or large exotic beasts approach the territory. Limitations. The force barrier only blocks player units. It cannot halt exotic beasts or ordinary wildlife. Territory location cannot be relocated. All territory effects vanish instantly if the flag is destroyed. As a primary tier item, advanced functions such as energy shields, automated counterattacks, and construction bonuses are currently unavailable. Just as I suspected, only a low-grade primary item. Higher-tier versions presumably possessed energy shields and automated defense. Yet Hao Yun had no means of upgrading it for now. His gaze traveled downward and caught the durability value listed at the bottom of the stats. He twitched his mouth. Flag durability, 10,000/10,000, merely 10,000 hit points? He knelt and tapped the dark timber pole with his knuckle. It produced a dull, solid thud. The material seemed sturdy, yet the durability stat was shockingly low. His constitution stood at 198, pushing his maximum health close to 20,000. This territory defense flag possessed less health than a single player. So this defensive marker is surprisingly fragile. Hao Yun stood up, amused and helpless. He had hoped the primary flag could withstand minor assaults from exotic beasts. Yet with 10,000 durability points, an elite monster above level 20 could smash it to splinters with a dozen charges. No wonder the barrier only blocked players and ignored beasts. With such low durability, the protection would not hold against monsters anyway. So the creators simply omitted monster collision mechanics entirely. He circled the flagpole, quickly brainstorming countermeasures. Fragile as it was, the 3 permanent buffs remained attractive. 5% higher spirit energy concentration, an extra 10% crop growth speed, and mild natural recovery, active continuously over the whole yard. The cumulative benefits were substantial. It would be foolish not to use it just because the flag could break. Later, he would build a waist-high stone barrier around the pole, to shield it from being rammed or dug up by ordinary beasts. Outside the stone barrier, he would lay dense beast traps and sharp stakes. Any beast or hypothetical trespasser would need to breach the trap perimeter first. Once he unlocked the formation master occupation, he could add a basic defensive formation beneath the flag, combining physical barriers and array protection to prevent easy destruction. Alright, expectations shouldn't be too high for primary tier equipment. Hao Yun shrugged and accepted the situation. He refocused his attention on the 2 silver automatic vending machines lined against the courtyard wall. He had been so occupied grinding dungeons that he had not checked the restock from 4 o'clock in the early morning. 10 normal dungeon reset scrolls obtained yesterday had rewarded over 10 blue rare items. The dungeon grind had been an enormous success. Curiosity stirred within him as he wondered what strange supplies today's restock pool contained. He walked over, scanning the display on the left machine first before checking the right one. Every shelf, item icon, stock quantity, even the dull, empty bottle tucked in the corner, matched perfectly between the 2 machines. Confirmed fully synchronized. Hao Yun had anticipated this, yet still felt a flicker of disappointment. Moving a second machine only saved him the trip to the rice paddies. He could not exploit multiple machines to double inventory refreshes. He tapped the touchscreen to pull up the complete list of newly restocked goods. He ignored common supplies such as whole wheat bread and bottled water. Time freeze had not lasted long. Goods inside supermarkets and shops remained mostly unexpired. He could travel into town to gather daily necessities whenever he wanted, so these held little priority. His attention locked onto the rows of glowing game items. He scanned each entry one by one. Primary Spirit Recovery Pill quickly restores a small amount of mental energy. Causes mild post-consumption fatigue. Primary Stamina Potion, common low-grade medicinal concoction. Gradually recovers a small amount of stamina over 10 seconds after ingestion. Might Pill White, boosts strength attribute by 10% temporarily. Effect lasts 30 minutes. Backpack Expander Purple, adds 1 permanent backpack storage slot. Excellent loot. Hao Yun's eyes lit up. Other medicinal pills were merely supplementary enhancements, but the backpack expansion module was a lifesaver. His backpack had long been bursting at the seams. Food supplies such as rice, cooking oil, and frozen beast meat occupied nearly 20 slots. Ores, medicinal herbs, tools, and materials took up another dozen. On top of that, there was a stack of unusable skill books, blueprints, along with various miscellaneous seeds, potions, and trap components. Every slot was crammed full. He started with 10 backpack slots, gaining 1 additional slot each level. Now at level 63, he only had 73 slots in total. Every time he headed out, he had to carefully rearrange his belongings to free up space. If he wanted to bring along 2 extra sacks of seeds, he first had to haul items over to the warehouse in his courtyard, a constant hassle. A little stingy, isn't it? He leaned closer to read the description again, confirming it only added 1 slot. In other games, backpack expansions unlock 10 or 20 slots at once. This deity only gives a single slot. Complaints aside, his hands moved without hesitation. Hao Yun tapped rapidly without the slightest pause, buying all 10 backpack expansion modules from the shelf. Ding. Purchased backpack expansion module times 10. Consumed low-grade spirit crystals times 10,000. The moment the system notification appeared, he glanced at his character panel. The number showing his spirit crystal balance shifted further into the negatives, dropping from just over negative 50,000 to more than negative 63,000. The long string of numbers looked quite striking. All right, another 10,000 owed. Hao Yun whistled, his expression completely calm. When you have countless lice, you stop feeling the itch. When your debts pile high, you cease worrying. This deity's payment verification system was clearly unfinished, and there was likely no upper limit on outstanding debts. If it ever came down to a reckoning, who would panic first remained to be seen. Ding. Purchased backpack expansion module times 1. Use immediately? Use. With a thought, the 10 modules transformed into pale blue specks of light and merged into his backpack interface. The backpack display had read 73/73, completely full. The maximum capacity climbed steadily and finally settled at 83 slots. 10 empty slots lined up neatly at the bottom. No longer would he need to spend half an hour rearranging items before every trip outside. I can finally breathe easy. Hao Yun let out a long sigh and immediately began sorting his inventory. Daily consumables such as rice, oil, and fresh meat were moved to the storage shed in the courtyard, leaving only a 2 to 3 day emergency reserve in his pack. Ores, medicinal herbs, and various materials were grouped neatly by category. Skill books, blueprints, and job change fragments occupied a separate row so they would not get lost among miscellaneous items. After tidying up, his backpack felt far less cluttered, and finding items became much simpler. Little by little, it added up. 10 more today, another 10 tomorrow. Within a few months, he could raise his backpack capacity to hundreds of slots. Time was unlimited in this frozen world. The vending machines restocked every day, and he could slowly gather as many slots as he wanted. Once he finished handling the expansion modules, he cleared out all the minor spirit recovery pills, stamina potions, and strength elixirs as well, stowing them neatly in the potion section. All of these combined only cost a few tens of thousands of spirit crystals. Hao Yun's total outstanding debt now stood at 100,000 spirit crystals. The vending machine on the right updated its status simultaneously. All rare items turned gray, marked as sold out. The 2 machines operated in perfect sync, leaving no loophole to exploit for duplicate purchases. He clapped his hands and turned toward the gentle slope outside the courtyard. The territory flag was planted. The vending machines emptied, and his backpack organized. With daylight still lingering, it was the perfect time to plant his spirit grain seeds. With bonuses from intermediate farming and the fertile land territory buff, paired with organic spirit fertilizer obtained from dungeons. The first harvest from this hillside might bring a pleasant surprise. 1 year into the time-stop era, morning mist drifted over the gray stone walls, settling into a thin layer of white frost across the farmland. Hao Yun stood in the courtyard, shaking his numbed arms, and looked toward the tiger sitting opposite him. He could not help but sigh. It had been exactly 1 year since time froze across the globe. Over this year, his level climbed steadily to 69, only one step away from level 70. Yet leveling had grown many times slower than in the beginning. The experience required for each level rose exponentially. Once, defeating a swarm of mosquitoes granted a noticeable chunk of progress. Now, wiping out an entire nest of level 20 mutated rats barely moved his experience bar. Elite monsters above level 30 deep in the back mountains offered generous experience, but they were scarce and mostly lived in groups. Hunting them took immense effort, nothing like the fast-paced leveling of his early exploration days. What truly stirred his emotions was Chongping Jun, the tiger who followed him everywhere, sharing his food and soaking up experience. Was now firmly at level 40. Its fur glistened sleekly, its shoulder height nearly reaching Hao Yun's chest. A single paw strike left indentations on the bluestone ground, and the wind stirred by its charges stung the skin. On its status panel, the 3 core attributes of strength, constitution, and agility rivaled his own as a level 69 player. Its explosive power in close combat even marginally surpassed his. Moments earlier, they had sparred casually. Hao Yun held back his primordial flame, relying only on his movement technique and physical constitution to trade blows. He was forced backward after fewer than 30 exchanges. Chomping Jun's paw strikes carried staggering force, jarring his wrists. Its fur was smooth and tough in close combat. Ordinary punches and kicks barely scratched it. He only managed to make the tiger retreat when a wisp of black flame flickered from his fingertips. "You're growing far too quickly." Hao Yun bent down to rub Chongping Jun's large head, poking its sturdy shoulder. "I spend every day hunting monsters and cultivating, while you eat meat and laze about. Your attributes are catching up to mine. Without the void-devouring flame keeping you in check, your master might soon lose a fight against you." Chongping Jun swished its tail and rumbled deep in its throat, acting as if this outcome was only natural. Ultimately, this unfinished system lacked balanced mechanics for beasts. Players faced soaring experience requirements to level up, while exotic beasts gained attributes simply based on their level base. A level 40 exotic beast already possessed formidable natural constitution. Add a steady diet of spirit grain and mutated beast meat, plus residual energy from constant exposure to the flame seed, and rapid attribute growth was inevitable. Thankfully, the void-devouring flame remained extremely powerful. After a year of nourishment, the primordial flame lingered at the peak of level 2, just a hair's breadth away from level 3. Its consumption efficiency and precise flame control had improved many times over since its initial form. For months now, Hao Yun's unchanging daily priority was waiting for the 2 courtyard vending machines to restock at 4 in the morning. Whether he needed the items or not, he cleared the inventory every time, a professional at exploiting this loophole. He collected no fewer than 20 bottles of low, grade, and intermediate flame seed nourishing liquid. He did not bother stockpiling them. Every bottle went straight into feeding the void-devouring flame. He had no choice. The primordial flame was his most reliable offensive ability. Aside from that, he relied on his hand-forged dark iron mountain cleaver for basic melee attacks. Fighting wild monsters felt far less efficient without it. Unfortunately, advancing a legendary grade flame seed came with an absurdly high threshold. Even after feeding it more than 20 nourishing liquid bottles, the level 2 progress bar only reached 90%. That final sliver separating it from level 3 remained out of reach. Beyond that, he repeatedly acquired practical items such as backpack expansion modules and dungeon reset vouchers. Backpack expansion modules appeared every few restocks, and he used every single one. His backpack capacity rose from the original 70-plus slots to over 180. He accumulated a thick stack of dungeon reset vouchers. Every other day, he entered the Mountain God Temple dungeon. However, the further he progressed, the more repetitive the rewards on normal difficulty became. The same few items appeared over and over, with fewer and fewer new discoveries. The most absurd item of all was the minor territory marker flag. He obtained 10 of them in total, lined up neatly to occupy an entire row in his backpack. The problem was they served almost no purpose. These flags could not be used as upgrade materials for his existing territory, nor could they establish new territories. The system rule limited each player to a single territory. To claim a second territory, he would need to remove his original territory flag. Naturally, Hao Yun would never uproot the flag anchoring his courtyard. The 10 minor flags were left gathering dust in his backpack. Throwing them away felt wasteful. Perhaps a future system update would unlock multiple territory functionality. Keeping them simply wasted valuable storage space. They were a classic example of something not worth using, yet too regrettable to discard. Occasionally, the vending machine stocked an item called a territory token, used to upgrade territory flags. These tokens were extremely costly, each priced at 10,000 spirit crystals. Fortunately, Hao Yun could afford the expense. He bought 5 tokens in succession, elevating his initial minor territory all the way to rank 3. The territory radius expanded to 300 meters. Hundreds of acres of farmland, the hillside grain plots, and the reservoir at the foot of the mountain all fell within its coverage. The 3 core buffs, spirit energy infusion, fertile land enhancement, and vitality regeneration, strengthened accordingly. Upgrading the territory flag unlocked new functions alongside increased health. Its total health rose from 10,000 to 1 million. It also gained a protective shield and automatic counterattack capability. Its attack damage remained somewhat low, dealing only 1,000 damage per strike. Still, it was more than enough to fend off aerial beasts. Hao Yun was now officially the world's largest debtor. His character panel showed an outstanding balance of negative 125 million spirit crystals. Every time the vending machines restocked, Hao Yun rushed to buy every available item without delay. To him, owing 10,000 and owing 125 million amounted to the same thing. Why leave free resources untouched? He could deal with the consequences if the system ever fixed this bug.